This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are.
The Voice of the Buddha. The Dhammapada. When the child who would become the Buddha was born, it is said that the Devas, or Shining Ones, who inhabit the heavens nearest earth, shouted, sang, played music, and danced with great joy. A famous seer, Ashita, witnessed their celebration and asked what had occasioned it. They told him of the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, declaring him the foremost jewel, unequalled, born for the welfare and ease of the human world. Describing him as the highest of all beings, the ultimate person, a bull among men, foremost of all people, they foresaw that he would set turning the wheel of Dhamma, like a strong, roaring lion, the conqueror of beasts. Ashita said to Siddhartha's father that the boy would become either a worldly or a spiritual ruler. To prevent him being attracted away from a courtly life to follow a spiritual quest, Siddhartha's father, a nobleman, surrounded him with tremendous wealth and the very best of things, turbans and clothes of the finest Varanasi silk, beautiful women, lotus ponds, a summer palace, a winter palace, and one for the rainy season. Eventually, though, aged 29, having glimpsed the inevitability of illness, old age, and death, Siddhartha grew disenchanted and set out to live as a homeless wanderer, seeking truth and meaning. 6 years later, having practiced austerities and meditated intently, he attained enlightenment, the unbounded state of freedom, joy, kindness, and clarity towards which all Buddhists aspire. A short while later, he began to teach what he had realized, known as Dhamma, and he soon gathered a large following. Buddha is a title, not a name, though in our era it is usually understood to refer to the man who was born Siddhartha Gautama. After his enlightenment he was known by many names, including Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya tribe of which he was a member. Buddha means awake, and the title is applied to one who rediscovers the path of Dhamma when it has long been forgotten. Tradition holds that there is a long line of Buddhas, of which Shakyamuni Buddha is the most recent. The Buddha taught for 45 years, instructing people of all backgrounds and every level of society. When he died, there came a tremendous earthquake, dreadful and astounding, and the thunders rolled across the heavens. At the Third Buddhist Council, convened by the great king Ashoka at Pataliputra in India around 250 before the Christian era, the final version of the scriptures was agreed. Another 100 to 150 years passed before these were written down. The scriptures were divided into 3 sections, known as the Tipitaka, literally meaning 3 baskets. Each basket contains 1 section and 1 form of the Buddha's teaching. They are the Vinaya Pitaka, containing the rules of conduct for monastic practitioners; the Sutta Pitaka, the collection of more than 10,000 discourses or suttas, accounts of the Buddha teaching in a wide range of circumstances, including some delivered by his closest disciples; the Abhidhamma Pitaka, an extrapolation of the underlying doctrinal principles of the Sutta Pitaka, which was compiled in the centuries following the Buddha's death. The Sutta Pitaka is divided into 5 sections, known as Nikayas, collections. The Digha Nikaya, or collection of long discourses, the middle length, or Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, grouped collection, the Anguttara Nikaya, or further factored collection, and the Khuddaka Nikaya, the collection of little texts. This recording includes readings from each of the 5 Nikayas. Our main text, the Dhammapada, is found in the Khuddaka Nikaya. An excellent summary of Buddhist belief and practice, the Dhammapada is a comprehensive guide to living with wisdom and compassion. Each verse is understood to have been spoken by the Buddha in response to a particular question or situation, and this immediacy is reflected in the text's practical nature, its directness in addressing how best to live one's life. The text has been translated many times since its first appearance in a Western language, Latin, in 1855. This recording uses a version translated by the English teacher Sangarakshita, first published in 2001. The first and second CDs in this set of 3 contain the reading of the Dhammapada, each section being prefaced by a short introduction to its major themes or symbolism. These introductions also explain technical words or ideas that might need clarification. The remainder of Disc 2 includes selections from a number of texts introduced with some remarks on the Buddha's approach to teaching and chosen to give a flavor of the voice of the Buddha. Disc 3 explores Dhamma, using passages from the Buddhist scriptures to introduce various ideas, values, and practices. The word sutta literally means thread, as one might string beads or precious stones together to make a necklace or sweet-smelling flowers to make a garland. The suttas thread together the words of the Buddha and his disciples. This collection of text from the Sutta Pitaka, partial though it is, introduces the scriptural tradition of Buddhism and offers at least a glimpse of the riches of the tradition. Pairs. The Dhammapada's first chapter contains the pith of the Buddha's teachings on mental and ethical discipline. The opening statement, that mind precedes experience, prepares the ground for the succeeding teachings on cultivating purity, love, stability, moderation, and contentment. Though some stanzas specifically describe wearers of yellow robes, that is, monks, the attitudes and practices enjoined are applicable to and attainable by all. In this chapter, an important figure from Buddhist mythology is introduced. Mara is the embodiment of evil, representing forces that obstruct the attainment of enlightenment.
Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. Those who entertain such thoughts as, "He abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me," will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as, "He abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me," will still their hatred. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Others do not realize that we are all heading for death. Those who do realize it will compose their quarrels. As the wind blows down a weak tree, so Mara overthrows one who lives seeing the unlovely as lovely, whose senses are uncontrolled, who is immoderate in food, lazy, and of inferior vigor. As the wind does not blow down the rocky mountain peak, so Mara does not overthrow one who lives seeing the unlovely as unlovely, whose senses are controlled, who is moderate in food, and whose faith and vigor are aroused. He is not worthy of the yellow robe, who takes it while still not free from impurity, and lacking in self-restraint and truth. He is worthy of the yellow robe, who has made an end to all impurity, who is well established in virtuous conduct, and who is endowed with self-restraint and truth. Those who take the unreal for the real, and who in the real see the unreal, they, wandering in the sphere of wrong thought, will not attain the real. Those who have known the real as the real, and the unreal as the unreal, they, moving in the sphere of right thought, will attain the real. As the rain penetrates the badly thatched house, so lust enters the spiritually undeveloped mind. As the rain does not penetrate into the well-thatched house, so lust does not enter the spiritually well-developed mind. The evildoer grieves in both worlds. He grieves here and he grieves there. He suffers and torments himself, seeing his own foul deeds. The doer of good rejoices in both worlds. He rejoices here and he rejoices there. He rejoices and is glad, seeing his own pure deeds. The evildoer burns in both worlds. He burns here and he burns there. He burns with remorse, thinking he has done evil, and he burns with suffering, having gone after death to an evil state. The doer of good delights in both worlds. He delights here and he delights there. He delights in this life, thinking he has done good, and he delights after death, having gone to a state of happiness. He who, for his own benefit, constantly recites the canonical literature, but does not act accordingly, that heedless man, like a cowherd that counts the cows of others, is not enriched by the ascetic life. He who, for his own benefit, recites even a little of the canonical literature, but lives in accordance with its principles, abandoning craving, hatred, and delusion, possessed of right knowledge, with mind well freed, clinging to nothing in this or any other world, he is enriched by the ascetic life.
Mindfulness. Many forms of Buddhist meditation cultivate mindfulness with the aim of unifying and focusing the meditator's energies. Such practices offer increasing stability and freedom from the tendency towards distraction of the undisciplined mind and the untrained heart's susceptibility to ups and downs. The immortal, or deathless, mentioned in this chapter, is one of many synonyms for nirvana, the goal of Buddhist practice, identified here as a state of freedom from death and rebirth.
Mindfulness is the way to the immortal, unmindfulness the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are like the dead. Knowing the distinction of mindfulness, the spiritually mature rejoice in mindfulness, and take delight in the sphere of the noble ones. Absorbed in superconscious states, recollected and ever exerting themselves, those wise ones realize nirvana, the unsurpassed security. Whoever is energetic, recollected, pure in conduct, considerate, self-restrained, of righteous life and mindful, the glory of such a one waxes exceedingly. By means of energy, mindfulness, self-restraint and control, let the wise one make for himself an island that no flood can overwhelm. Out of their evil understanding, the spiritually immature abandon themselves to unmindfulness. The wise one guards mindfulness as his chief treasure. Do not abandon yourselves to unmindfulness. Have no intimacy with sensuous delights. The mindful person, absorbed in superconscious states, gains ample bliss. As a dweller in the mountains looks down on those who live in the valley, so the spiritually mature person, the hero free from sorrow, having driven out unmindfulness by means of mindfulness, ascends to the palace of wisdom, and looks down at the sorrowful, spiritually immature multitude below. Mindful among the unmindful, wide awake among the sleeping, the man of good understanding forges ahead like a swift horse outdistancing a feeble hack. By means of mindfulness, Bhagava attains to the chieftaincy of the gods. Mindfulness is always praised, unmindfulness always despised. The bhikkhu who delights in mindfulness, and who regards unmindfulness with fear, advances like fire, burning up fetters gross and subtle. The bhikkhu who delights in mindfulness, and who regards unmindfulness with fear, is not liable to regression. He is in the presence of nirvana.
The mind. This chapter continues to praise the well-trained mind, warning of the dangers of dissolution and indiscipline, and exhorting the benefits of steadiness, wakefulness, contentment, and clarity, all of which lead to happiness and freedom.
As a fletcher straightens the arrow, so the man of understanding makes straight the trembling, unsteady mind, which is difficult to guard and difficult to restrain. As a fish threshes from side to side when taken from one abode to another and cast on dry land, so the mind throbs and vibrates with the strain as it abandons the domain of Mara. The mind is frivolous and difficult to control, alighting on whatever it pleases. It is good to tame the mind. A tamed mind brings happiness. The mind is extremely subtle and difficult to grasp, alighting on whatever it pleases. Let the man of understanding keep watch over the mind. A guarded mind brings happiness. Far-ranging and lone-faring is the mind, incorporeal and abiding in the cave of the heart. Those who bring it under control are freed from the bonds of Mara. His wisdom does not attain to perfection whose mind is unsettled, who is ignorant of the real truth, and whose faith wavers. There is no fear for someone who is awake, whose mind is uncontaminated by craving and unperplexed, and who has given up vice and virtue. Perceiving the body to be fragile like a clay pot, and fortifying the mind as though it were a city, with the sword of wisdom make war on Mara. Free from attachment, keep watch over what has been won. Before long, this body, devoid of consciousness, will lie rejected on the ground like a useless faggot. Whatever foe may do to foe, or hater to hater, greater is the harm done to oneself by a wrongly directed mind. Neither mother nor father nor any other relative can do one as much good as a perfectly directed mind.
Flowers. Floral symbolism is variously used in this chapter to describe the limited beauties of the physical and the transcendental beauties of the spiritual world, and it contrasts the unreal accomplishment of those who simply mouth wise words with those who truly embody wisdom in a life of mindfulness and care.
Who shall conquer the earth and the realm of death with its deities? Who shall make out the well-taught verses of truth as an expert picks flowers? The learner of the transcendental path shall conquer the realm of death with its deities. The learner shall make out the well-taught verses of truth as an expert picks flowers. Seeing the body as froth, and thoroughly comprehending its mirage nature, let one proceed unseen by the king of death, having broken the flower-tipped arrows of Mara. As a great flood carries away a sleeping village, so death bears off the man who, possessed of longing, plucks only the flowers of existence. The destroyer brings under his sway the man who, possessed by longing, plucks only the flowers of existence, and who is insatiable in sexual passions. Let the silent sage move about in the village, as the bee goes, taking honey from the flower, without harming colour or fragrance. One should pay no heed to the faults of others, what they have done and not done. Rather should one consider the things that one has oneself done and not done. Like a beautiful flower, brightly coloured but without scent, even so useless is the well-uttered speech of one who does not act accordingly. Like a beautiful flower, brightly coloured and scented, even so useful is the well-uttered speech of one who acts accordingly. As many garlands are made from a heap of flowers, so one who is a mortal born should perform many ethically skilful deeds. The fragrance of flowers, of sandalwood, of aromatic resin or jasmine, does not go against the wind, whereas the fragrance of the good does go against the wind. Sandalwood or aromatic resin, blue lotus or wild jasmine, of all these kinds of fragrance, the odour of virtue is unsurpassed. Insignificant in comparison is this fragrance of aromatic resin and sandalwood. The fragrance of virtue it is that blows among the gods as the highest. Mara does not find the path of those who are virtuous, who live mindfully, and who are freed through perfect knowledge. As pink lotuses, sweet-scented and lovely, spring from a heap of rubbish thrown in the highway, so among those who have become as rubbish, among ignorant, ordinary people, the disciple of the perfectly enlightened one shines forth exceedingly in wisdom.
The spiritually immature. Chapters 5 and 6 contrast the qualities of the spiritually immature and the spiritually mature person. Here are listed some of the actions and attitudes that it is necessary to abandon in order to move towards wisdom and maturity.
Long is the night to the wakeful, long the league to one who is exhausted with travel. Long is the process of faring through repeated existences to those spiritually immature ones who do not know the real truth. If he who goes about in search of truth does not find one better than, or at least similar to, himself, let him firmly lead a solitary life. There is no companionship for him with the spiritually immature. The spiritually immature person vexes himself, thinking, "Sons are mine, riches are mine." He himself is not his own even. How then sons? How then riches? The spiritually immature person who recognizes his immaturity is to that extent mature. The spiritually immature one who thinks of himself as mature is termed immature indeed. Though throughout his life a spiritually immature person honors one who is spiritually mature, he does not necessarily know the truth any more than the spoon knows the taste of the soup. If, for a moment, a wise man attends upon one who is spiritually mature, he quickly perceives the truth, as the tongue at once detects the taste of the soup. Of evil understanding, the spiritually immature live as enemies to themselves, committing sinful deeds, the consequences of which are bitter. That deed is not well done which, being done, one repents, and the result of which one suffers with tearful face and lamentations. That deed is well done which, being done, one does not repent, and the result of which one receives gladly. So long as it has not ripened, the spiritually immature one thinks sin as sweet as honey. But when sin does ripen, then the spiritually immature one suffers a downfall. Month after month, a spiritually immature person may eat his food with the tip of a blade of sacred kusa grass, yet his worth is not a fraction of those who have ascertained the truth. Unlike milk which flows immediately the teat is sucked, the sin that has been committed does not at once bear fruit. Instead, it pursues the spiritually immature person, like a fire covered with ashes, burning him only after a time. The spiritually immature person wins theoretical religious knowledge only to his own disadvantage. It destroys his better nature while splitting his head. One who is spiritually immature desires a false reputation, honor among fellow bhikkhus, authority over monastic settlements, and respect from the families living round about. Let both those householders and those who have gone forth from the household life approve what I have done. Let them be subject to me in all undertakings, great and small. Such is the wish of the spiritually immature, as a result of which his craving and conceit increase. One thing is that which leads to worldly gain, quite another the way that leads to nirvana. Thus comprehending, let the bhikkhu, the disciple of the Buddha, take no delight in respectful greetings, but devote himself to solitude.
The spiritually mature. The further shore is a graphic image of the awakened state, while the unenlightened or spiritually immature can only run back and forth on the near side of the stream, futilely expending energy in the encompassing pursuits of everyday life. The wise, the awakened, the spiritually mature are able to cross over to the cool refreshment of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment, bojjhanga in Pali, mentioned at the end of the chapter, are practices and qualities aiding development towards spiritual maturity. Mindfulness, investigation of mental states, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity.
Should one see a man of understanding who, as if indicating a buried treasure, points out faults and administers reproof, let one associate with such a spiritually mature person. To associate with one like this is good, not evil. Let him instruct, let him advise, let him restrain one from uncivilized behavior, and the result will be that he will be dear to the good and detestable to the bad. Do not associate with evil friends. Do not associate with low fellows. Associate with spiritual friends. Associate with superior men. One who has imbibed the truth lives happily with well-seeing mind. The spiritually mature person delights in the truth made known by the noble. Irrigators draw off waters. Fletchers straighten arrows. Carpenters shape wood. The spiritually mature discipline themselves. As a solid rock cannot be shaken by the wind, so the spiritually mature person is unmoved by praise or blame. Hearing the truth of things, the spiritually mature win insight like a deep lake suddenly becoming clear and undisturbed. True men give up everything. The righteous do not speak wishing for sensuous pleasures. Touched now by pleasure, now by pain, the spiritually mature show neither elation nor depression. Not for one's own sake, nor for the sake of others, should one desire sons, wealth, or territory. One should not desire success for oneself by unrighteous means. He who behaves in such a way is virtuous, is wise, is righteous. Few among men are those who go to the further shore. The other ordinary people chase up and down this shore. Those people who conform themselves to the well-explained truth of things, and who are desirous of reaching the further shore, will pass over the realm of death, so difficult to transcend. Forsaking dark ways, the spiritually mature person cultivates the bright. Coming from home to the homeless life, he abides in solitude, which is hard to enjoy. Giving up delight in sensuous pleasures, the spiritually mature person, the man of no possessions, should purify himself from all mental defilements. They whose minds have cultivated to perfection the factors of enlightenment, and who, free from clinging, delight in the giving up of attachment, those bias-free, radiant ones, become cool, even in this life.
The supremely worthy. The supremely worthy one, whose impurities are extinct, is awakened. He or she has reached the goal of practice, has gained the further shore. This chapter rejoices in the experiences of freedom, joy, and tranquility that characterize realization on the Buddhist path.
The burning fever of passion does not exist for one who has finished his journey, who is free from sorrow, wholly emancipated, and released from all the bonds of conditionality. The mindful, who leave home, do not delight in an abode. Like wild geese quitting a lake, they abandon whatever security they have. Those who do not accumulate material or mental possessions, who thoroughly understand the true nature of the food they eat, and whose range of experience is liberation through the realization of the empty and unconditioned, their path, like that of birds in the sky, is difficult to trace. He whose impurities are extinct, who is not attached to food, and whose range of experience is liberation through the realization of the empty and unconditioned, his path, like that of birds in the sky, is difficult to trace. He whose senses are pacified, like horses well controlled by the charioteer, who has eradicated conceit, and who is free from impurities, the very gods love a man of such good qualities as these. Like the earth he offers no opposition. Like the main pillar of the city gate he stands firm. He is pure like a lake free from mud. For a man of such good qualities as these, there are no more wanderings from life to life. Tranquil is the thought, tranquil the word and deed, of that supremely tranquil person who is emancipated through perfect knowledge. He is a superior man who does not merely believe, but who knows the unmade, who has severed all links with conditioned existence, put an end to the occasions of good and evil, and who has renounced all worldly hopes. Whether village or forest, plain or hill, delightful is that spot where the supremely worthy dwell. Delightful are the forests where ordinary people find no pleasure. Those who are free from passion delight in them, for they do not go in quest of sensuous enjoyment.
The thousands. It does not matter how many times one repeats meaningless words. They will not lead to tranquility. A single day lived with mindfulness and understanding is more beneficial than any number of years lived in confusion and distraction. This chapter compares the relative value of spending time on ultimately unimportant pursuits with living with awareness and engaging the heart in concentrated reflection on the true nature of conditioned things. Another figure from Eastern mythology is introduced. Brahma is the ruler of the realm of archetypal form, Rupaloka, a counterpart to Mara, who governs the realm of sense desire, Kamaloka.
Better than 1,000 meaningless words collected together is a single meaningful word, on hearing which one becomes tranquil. Better than 1,000 meaningless verses collected together is one meaningful line of verse, on hearing which one becomes tranquil. Though one should recite 100 verses, verses without meaning, better is one line of Dhamma, on hearing which one becomes tranquil. Though one should conquer in battle thousands upon thousands of men, yet he who conquers himself is truly the greatest in battle. It is indeed better to conquer oneself than to conquer other people. Of a man who has subdued himself and who lives self-controlled, neither a god nor a celestial musician nor Mara together with Brahma can undo the victory of a person who is subdued and controlled like that. If month after month for 100 years one should offer sacrifices by the 1,000, and if for a single moment one should venerate a spiritually developed person, better is that act of veneration than the 100 years of sacrifices. Though one should tend the sacred fire in the forest for 100 years, yet if he venerates a spiritually developed person even for a moment, better is that act of veneration than the 100 years spent tending the sacred fire. Whatever oblations and sacrifices one might offer here on earth in the course of the whole religious year, seeking to gain merit thereby, all that is not a quarter as meritorious as paying respect to those who live uprightly, which is indeed excellent. For him who is of a reverential disposition, 4 things constantly increase: life, beauty, happiness, and strength. Though one should live 100 years, unethical and unintegrated, better is one single day lived ethically and absorbed in higher meditative states. Though one should live 100 years of evil understanding and unintegrated, better is one single day lived possessed of wisdom and absorbed in higher meditative states. Better than 100 years lived lazily and with inferior energy is one single day lived with energy aroused and fortified. Better than 100 years lived unaware of the rise and fall of conditioned things is one single day lived aware of the rise and fall of conditioned things. Better than 100 years lived unaware of the deathless state is one single day lived aware of the deathless state. Better than 100 years lived unaware of the supreme truth is one single day lived aware of the supreme truth.
Evil. Since their results are seldom immediately evident, we think our actions have no consequences. But Buddhist teachings insist that how we act will affect us in the future, either positively or negatively, depending on our intentions. This belief is a strong impetus to generous, kindly, ethical action, by means of which, little by little, one is filled with good.
Be quick to do what is morally beautiful. Restrain the mind from evil. He who is sluggish in doing good, his mind delights in evil. Should a man once do evil, let him not make a habit of it, let him not set his heart on it. Painful is the heaping up of evil. Should a man once do good, let him make a habit of it, let him set his heart upon it. Happy is the heaping up of good. As long as it bears no fruit, so long the evil-doer sees the evil he has done as good. When it bears fruit in the form of suffering, he recognizes it as evil. As long as it bears no fruit, so long the good man sees the good he has done as evil. When it bears fruit in the form of happiness, then he recognizes it as good. Do not underestimate evil, thinking, "It will not approach me." A water pot becomes full by the constant falling of drops of water. Similarly, the spiritually immature person, little by little, fills himself with evil. Do not underestimate good, thinking, "It will not approach me." A water pot becomes full by the constant falling of drops of water. Similarly, the wise man, little by little, fills himself with good. As a merchant travelling with a small caravan and much wealth avoids a dangerous road, or as one desirous of life shuns poison, so should one keep clear of evil. If one has no wound in one's hand, one may safely handle poison. The unwounded hand is not affected by poison. Similarly, no evil befalls him who does no wrong. Whoever offends against an innocent man, one who is pure and faultless, to that spiritually immature person the evil he has committed comes back, like fine dust thrown against the wind. Some beings arise by way of conception in the womb. Evildoers are born in a state of woe. Those who do good go to heaven. Those who are free from defilements become utterly cool. Not in the sky, nor in the midst of the sea, nor yet in the clefts of the mountains. Nowhere in the world, in fact, is there any place to be found where, having entered, one can abide free from the consequences of one's evil deeds. Not in the sky, nor in the midst of the sea, nor yet in the clefts of mountains. Nowhere in the world, in fact, is there any place to be found where, having entered, one will not be overcome by death.
Punishment. This chapter warns of the dangers of ethical downfall. Importantly, this is described not just in terms of actions that harm, but also of attitudes, such as conceit, and of rough and useless speech. Living with awareness that our actions will have consequences, sooner or later, encourages care and discipline in how we relate to others and ourselves.
All living beings are terrified of punishment. All fear death. Making comparison of others with oneself, one should neither kill nor cause to kill. All living beings are terrified of punishment. To all, life is dear. Making comparison of others with oneself, one should neither kill nor cause to kill. Whoever torments with a stick creatures desirous of happiness, he himself thereafter, seeking happiness, will not attain happiness. Whoever does not torment with a stick creatures desirous of happiness, he himself thereafter, seeking happiness, will obtain happiness. Do not speak roughly to anyone. Those thus spoken to will answer back. Painful indeed is angry talk, as a result of which one will experience retribution. If you can silence yourself like a shattered metal plate, you have already attained nirvana. No anger is found in you. As a cowherd drives cows out to pasture with a stick, so do old age and death drive the life out of living beings. A spiritually immature person performs evil deeds, not realizing their true nature. By his own actions is the man of evil understanding tormented as though consumed by fire. Whoever inflicts punishment on the innocent, or who offends against the unoffending, he speedily falls into one of the 10 states. He meets either with intense physical pain, or material loss, or bodily injury, or serious illness, or mental derangement. Or he meets with trouble from the government, or a serious accusation, or bereavement, or loss of wealth. Or else his houses are consumed by fire, while on the dissolution of the body, that man of evil understanding is reborn in a state of woe. Not going about naked, not the wearing of matted locks, not abstention from food, not sleeping on the bare ground, not smearing the body with dust and ashes, nor yet the practice of squatting on the balls of the feet, can purify a mortal who has not overcome his doubts. If one who is richly adorned lives in tranquility, is calm, controlled, assured of eventual enlightenment, and devotes himself to the spiritual life, laying down the stick with regard to all living beings, then, despite his being richly adorned, he is a Brahmana, he is an ascetic, he is a bhikkhu. In the whole world, is there a man to be found who, restrained by a sense of shame, avoids censure as a good horse avoids the whip? Like a good horse touched by the whip, be zealous and stirred by profound religious emotion. By means of faith, upright conduct, energy, concentration, and investigation of the truth, as well as by being endowed with spiritual knowledge and righteous behavior, and by being mindful, leave this great suffering behind. Irrigators draw off the waters. Fletchers straighten arrows. Carpenters shape wood. Righteous men discipline themselves.
Decay. A human birth is considered a great and rare opportunity. Traditionally, it is said to be as unlikely as the possibility of a blind sea turtle which rises from the depths only once every 100 years, breaking the water so that its head pokes through the hole of a yoke afloat on the wide ocean. And yet it passes so quickly. The body is subject to suffering and decay, and we all eventually die. This chapter is an urgent call to attention. Grasp this opportunity for awakening.
What mirth can there be, what pleasure, when all the time everything is blazing with a threefold fire of suffering, impermanence, and insubstantiality. Covered though you are in blind darkness, you do not seek a light. Look at this painted doll, this pretentious mass of sores, wretched and full of cravings, nothing of which is stable or lasting. Wasted away is this body, a nest of disease and perishable. The putrid mass breaks up. Death is the end of life. When, like gourds in autumn, these dove-grey bones lie here discarded, what pleasure can one take in looking at them? The body is a city built of bones and plastered with flesh and blood, a city wherein lie concealed decay and death, pride and hypocrisy. Even the richly decorated royal chariots in time wear out. Likewise the body also perishes. But the truth of the mindful does not perish, for those who are tranquil speak of it to the well-bred. The man of little learning lives like a stalled ox. His flesh increases, but his wisdom does not. Many a birth have I undergone in this process of faring on in the round of conditioned existence, seeking the builder of the house and not finding him. Painful is such repeated birth. House builder, now you are seen. Never again shall you build me a house. Your rafters are all broken, your ridge-poles shattered. The conditioned mind too has gone to destruction. One has attained to the cessation of craving. Those who have not led the spiritual life, or obtained the wealth of merit in their youth, such as these brood over the past, like aged herons in a pond without fish. Those who have not led the spiritual life, or obtained the wealth of merit in their youth, such as these lie like worn-out arrows, lamenting the things of old.
Self. We each are responsible for our own actions and attitudes. No other person or deity can protect us from the consequences of our actions. And so we must establish for ourselves a sound and appropriate sense of how to live a good life, and scrupulously attend to what is best and wisest.
If a man really regards himself as dear, let him well and truly protect himself. During one or another of the 3 watches of the night, the spiritually mature person should keep wide awake. First, establish yourself in what is suitable. Then advise others. The spiritually mature person should not besmirch himself by acting otherwise. Should you act as you advise others to act, then it would be a case of one who was self-controlled, exercising control over others. The self is truly difficult to control. One is indeed one's own protector. What other protector should there be? With oneself well controlled, one finds a protector who is hard to find. The evil done by oneself, born of oneself, produced by oneself, destroys the man of evil understanding as a diamond pulverizes a piece of rock crystal. He whose unprincipled behavior is without limit, like a Maluva creeper overspreading a sal tree, does to his own self that which his enemy wishes to do to him. Easily done are things which are bad and not beneficial to oneself. What is both beneficial and good, that is exceedingly difficult to do. The man of evil understanding who, on account of his wrong views, obstructs the message of the supremely worthy, the noble ones, the men of authentic life, that wicked person, like a Katak reed, performs actions to his own destruction. A man besmirches himself by the evil he personally commits. Similarly, he purifies himself by personally abstaining from evil. Purity and impurity are matters of personal experience. One man cannot purify another. Consequently, one should not neglect one's own spiritual welfare for the welfare of others, great as that may be. Clearly perceiving what constitutes one's personal welfare, one should devote oneself to one's own good.
The world. A good life is joyful and beneficial. Delightful day by day, its consequences too are positive. So one gains now and in the future. However one has lived in the past, taking up Dhamma practice, we grow in wisdom and happiness, and are better able to distinguish what is truly beneficial from our mistaken perceptions of the conditioned world.
Don't follow inferior principles. Don't live heedlessly. Don't entertain false views. Don't be the one who, by following inferior principles, keeps the world going. Get up. Don't be heedless. Live practicing the Dhamma which is good conduct. One who lives practicing the Dhamma dwells happily both in this world and the other world. Live practicing the Dhamma. Do not live behaving badly. One who lives practicing the Dhamma dwells happily both in this world and the other world. Look upon the world as a bubble. Look upon it as a mirage. The King of Death does not see one who looks upon the world in this way. Come, just look at this world, which is like a decorated royal chariot in which the spiritually immature sink down, but with regard to which there is no attachment on the part of those who really know. One who, having formerly been heedless, later is not heedless, lights up the world like the moon when freed from clouds. One who covers over the evil deeds he has done with ethically skillful actions lights up this world like the moon when freed from clouds. This world is mentally blinded. Few see clearly. Few are those who, like birds freed from the net, go to heaven. Swans fly on the path of the sun. Those with supernormal powers travel through the air. The wise, having conquered Mara and his army, are led away from the world. There is no wrong that cannot be committed by a lying person who has transgressed one good principle, and who has given up all thought of the other world. Truly, misers do not get to the world of the gods. Only the spiritually immature do not praise giving. The wise man rejoices in giving, and therefore is happy in the hereafter. The fruit of stream entry is better than sole sovereignty over the earth, better than going to heaven, better than lordship over all the worlds.
The Enlightened One. The true happiness of the enlightened ones cannot be found in the things of everyday life. The beauty and pleasure of the spiritual realm is far greater than the conditioned. And though we seek refuge from suffering in the things of the world, these cannot ongoingly sustain us. The people we love will fade and die. The things we crave will break and fail us. This chapter describes the Enlightened One, who has put an end to craving for the things of this world, who has transcended illusion and passed beyond grief and lamentation.
That Enlightened One, whose sphere is endless, whose victory is irreversible, and after whose victory no defilements remain to be conquered, by what track will you lead him astray, the trackless one? That Enlightened One, in whom there is not that ensnaring, entangling craving to lead anywhere in conditioned existence, and whose sphere is endless, by what track will you lead him astray, the trackless one? Those wise ones who are intent on absorption in higher meditative states, and who delight in the calm of renunciation, even the gods love them, those thoroughly enlightened and mindful ones. Difficult is the attainment of the human state. Difficult is the life of mortals. Difficult is the hearing of the real truth. Difficult is the appearance of the enlightened ones. The not doing of anything evil, undertaking to do what is ethically skillful, and complete purification of the mind. This is the ordinance of the enlightened ones. Patient endurance is the best form of penance. Nirvana is the highest, say the enlightened ones. No true goer forth from the household life is he who injures another, nor is he a true ascetic who persecutes others. Not to speak evil, not to injure, to exercise restraint through the observance of the code of conduct, to be moderate in diet, and to occupy oneself with higher mental states. This is the ordinance of the enlightened ones. Not even in a shower of money is satisfaction of desires to be found. Worldly pleasures are of little relish, indeed painful. Thus, understanding, the spiritually mature person takes no delight even in heavenly pleasures. The disciple of the fully, perfectly enlightened one takes delight only in the destruction of craving. Many people, out of fear, flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. He who goes for refuge to the enlightened one, to the truth, and to the spiritual community, and who sees with perfect wisdom the four Aryan truths, namely suffering, the origin of suffering, the passing beyond suffering, and the Aryan eightfold way leading to the pacification of suffering. For him, this is a safe refuge. For him, this is the best refuge. Having gone to such a refuge, one is released from all suffering. Hard to come by is the ideal man. He is not born everywhere. Where such a wise one is born, that family grows happy. Happy is the appearance of the enlightened ones. Happy is the teaching of the real truth. Happy is the unity of the spiritual community. Happy is the spiritual effort of the united. He who reverences those worthy of reverence, whether enlightened ones or their disciples, men who have transcended illusion and passed beyond grief and lamentation. He who reverences those who have such a nature, who moreover are at peace and without cause for fear, his merit is not to be reckoned as such and such.
Happiness. It is said that, like a crystal laid on patterned cloth, the mind takes on the colors of that to which it is near. So, by spending time with the spiritually immature, one takes on the color of their limited concerns. And by spending time with the wise, with the spiritually mature, one experiences increasing happiness and contentment. The 5 constituents of conditioned existence are the 5 groups of factors, khanda in Pali, skandha in Sanskrit, into which the Buddha analyzes the living being: material form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Happy indeed we live, friendly amid the haters. Among men who hate, we dwell free from hate. Happy indeed we live, healthy amid the sick. Among men who are sick, we dwell free from sickness. Happy indeed we live, content amid the greedy. Among men who are greedy, we dwell free from greed. Happy indeed we live, we for whom there are no possessions. Feeders on rapture shall we be, like the gods of brilliant light. Victory begets hatred, for the defeated one experiences suffering. The tranquil one experiences happiness, giving up both victory and defeat. There is no fire like lust, no blemish like demerit, no suffering like the taking up of the 5 constituents of conditioned existence, no happiness like peace. Hunger is the worst disease, conditioned existence the worst suffering. Knowing this as it really is, one realizes that nirvana is the highest happiness. Health is the highest gain, contentment the greatest riches, the trustworthy are the best kinsmen. Nirvana is the supreme happiness. Having enjoyed the flavor of solitude and tranquility, free from sorrow and free from sin, one enjoys the rapturous flavor of the truth. Good it is to see the spiritually developed. To actually dwell with them is always happiness. By not seeing the spiritually immature, one indeed will be perpetually happy. By living in company with the spiritually immature, one grieves for a long time. Association with the spiritually immature is always painful, like association with an enemy. Association with the wise is pleasant, like the coming together of relatives. Therefore it is said, follow one who is wise, understanding and learned, who bears the yoke of virtue, is religious and spiritually developed. Follow one of such a nature as the moon follows the path of the stars.
Affections. Chapter 16 begins with a series of verses enjoining the letting go of what is dear to us. This is a form of preventive medicine, based on the truth that we suffer greatly through our attachment to people and things of this world. We suffer because the people we love suffer, and we suffer when we are separated from them. We suffer through not having the things we desire, and we suffer when they are taken from us. The teaching suggests that we consciously loosen our bonds and lessen our hankerings in order to free ourselves from these forms of suffering. One whose stream goes upwards is a person set on enlightenment. The image evokes both the rarity of such a person and the difficulty of the task.
Devoting himself to the unbefitting, and not devoting himself to the fitting, he, rejecting the truly good, and grasping the merely pleasant, envies those who are devoted to the truly good. Don't associate with the dear, and never with the undear. Not seeing those who are dear is painful, as is seeing those who are not dear. Therefore, let nothing be dear to you, for separation from the dear is experienced as an evil. There exist no bonds for those for whom there is neither the dear nor the undear. From the dear arises grief. From the dear arises fear. For the one who is wholly free from the dear, there exists no grief. Whence should fear come? From affection arises grief. From affection arises fear. For the one who is wholly free from affection, there exists no grief. Whence should fear come? From sensual enjoyment arises grief. From sensual enjoyment arises fear. For one who is wholly free from sensual enjoyment, there is no grief. Whence should fear come? From lustful desire arises grief. From lustful desire arises fear. For one who is wholly free from lustful desire, there is no grief. Whence should fear come? From craving arises grief. From craving arises fear. For one who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief. Whence should fear come? People hold him dear who is perfect in right conduct and vision, who is principled and a speaker of the truth, and who carries out his own spiritual tasks. He is called one whose stream goes upwards, in whom is born an ardent aspiration for the undefined, whose mind would be permeated by the thrill of his progress so far, and whose heart is unattached to sensual pleasures. When a man long absent from home returns safely from a distant place, his relatives, friends, and well-wishers rejoice exceedingly at his return. Similarly, his own good deeds receive him when he goes from this world to the other world, as relatives receive a dear one on his return home.
Anger. Here we are encouraged to develop equanimity, truthfulness, and contentment, giving up attachments and anger. Attila, mentioned in this chapter, was a layman who criticized disciples of the Buddha for the various failings described. The Buddha's response was that it is impossible to escape criticism in this world. There always will be someone who disapproves of how we act. Our task, then, is to free ourselves from our real faults and to apply ourselves to cultivating moral qualities and understanding, since even the gods praise such a man.
Let one give up anger, renounce conceit, and overcome all fetters. Suffering does not befall him who is unattached to name and form, and who is without material or mental possessions. I call him a charioteer, who holds back the arisen anger as though holding back a swerving chariot. Others are only holders of reins. Overcome the angry by non-anger. Overcome the wicked with good. Overcome the miserly by giving, the teller of lies with truth. Speak the truth. Do not get angry. Give your might to those who ask for alms. On these three grounds one goes into the presence of the gods. Those silent sages, who are harmless and always self-controlled, go to the immovable abode, whither, having gone, they do not grieve. They come to the end of their defilements, those who keep awake, who study day and night, and who are intent on nirvana. This is an old story, Attila, not just one of today. They blame him who is taciturn. They blame him who is talkative. They even blame him who speaks in moderation. There is no one in the world who is not blamed. There has not been, nor will be, nor is there anyone now who is absolutely blamed or absolutely praised. Who is entitled to blame that man who is like a coin of Jumbanada gold, a man who is praised by the wise, by those who have tested him day by day, one who is free from faults, a man of understanding, and whose wisdom and understanding are well integrated? Even the gods praise such a man. By Brahma too is he praised. Be on your guard against bodily agitation. Be controlled in body. Giving up bodily misconduct, live well behaved as regards the body. Be on your guard against verbal agitation. Be controlled in speech. Giving up verbal misconduct, live well behaved as regards speech. Be on your guard against mental agitation. Be controlled in mind. Giving up mental misconduct, live well behaved as regards the mind. They are the perfectly restrained ones, the wise who are controlled in body and speech, together with the wise who are controlled as regards the mind.
Stains. Because death is ever near, we have no time to waste. We must free ourselves from the stain of wrong ideas and harmful behavior, and cultivate what is good. This is not easily done, but the sufferings of lust, anger, and delusion are great, and freedom from them is much to be desired. This chapter deals mainly with ethical standards and practices taken up in order to purify oneself. Tathagata is another name for the Buddha, one who has come to awakening.
You are now like a withered leaf. Death's men have approached you. You stand at the door of departure, and you do not even have provisions for the road. Make a lamp for yourself. Strive quickly, and become one who is spiritually mature. With stains removed and free from blemish, you will reach the celestial plane of the spiritually developed. You are now of advanced age. You have gone forth into the presence of death. There is no resting place for you in between, and you do not even have provisions for the road. Make a lamp for yourself. Strive quickly, and become one who is spiritually mature. With stains removed and free from blemish, you will not undergo repeated birth and old age any more. The man of understanding removes his stains gradually, little by little and from moment to moment, just as the silversmith removes the impurities of silver. Just as rust springing from iron, having sprung from that, eats it away, even so his own actions lead the transgressor to an evil state. Non-repetition is the stain of the orally transmitted sacred verses. Inactivity in maintaining them is the stain of houses. Sloth is the stain of beauty of complexion. Heedlessness is the stain of one who guards. Misconduct is the stain of a woman. Stinginess is the stain of one who gives. Both in this world and the other world, stains are indeed evil things. A greater stain than these is ignorance, which is the supreme stain. Abandoning this stain, be stainless, bhikkhus. He has an easy life who is shameless, impudent as a crow, disparaging of others' merits, obtrusive, arrogant, and of a corrupt way of life. Life is hard for one with a sense of shame, who always seeks purity, who is unattached or strenuous, who is humble and of a pure way of life and discerning. Whoever in this world of ours destroys life, tells lies, takes what is not given, resorts to the wives of others, and is addicted to the drinking of intoxicants, that man in this world himself digs up his own roots of merit. Know this, good man, evil ways are perceptible as such. Don't let greed and unrighteousness subject you to prolonged suffering. People give alms according to their faith and at their good pleasure. One who is discontented about the food and drink of others does not attain concentration, be it by day or by night. One in whom this kind of attitude is extirpated, it being destroyed at its roots and abolished, he attains concentration, be it by day or by night. There is no fire like lust. There is no grip like anger. There is no net like delusion. There is no river like craving. The faults of others are easily seen. One's own faults are seen with difficulty. One winnows the faults of others like chaff, but one covers up one's own as a dishonest gambler covers up a losing throw of the dice. He who pays attention to the faults of others and is always irritable, his defilements grow. He is far from the destruction of the defilements. There is no track in the sky. There is no true ascetic outside this teaching. The race of men delight in illusion. The Tathagatas are free from illusions. There is no track in the sky. There is no true ascetic outside this teaching. There are no conditioned things that are eternal. There is no vacillation in the enlightened ones.
The man of principle. We cannot judge people solely by their outward actions. Though in the world a person might be respected for his or her age, appearance, or wise words, inwardly that person might be utterly different to how he or she seems. It is easy to fool some of the people some of the time. This chapter describes the principled person as modest, friendly, harmless, committed to truth and understanding.
He is not a man of principle who rashly judges what is advantageous. The spiritually mature person who judges both what is advantageous and disadvantageous, who judges others impartially, carefully, and in accordance with principle, that man of understanding, guarded of principle, is said to be a man of principle. A man is not spiritually mature merely because he talks a lot. He is said to be spiritually mature who is secure in himself, friendly, and without fear. He is not a vessel of the teaching merely because he talks a lot. He who, having heard only a little, personally sees the truth, He truly is a vessel of the teaching, that man who is not neglectful of the teaching. A man is not an elder because his head is grey. Though of mature age, he is called grown old in vain. He is truly called an elder in whom are truth and principle, together with harmlessness, self-control, and restraint, and who is without stain and wise. One who is jealous, miserly, and dishonest is not accounted good merely by reason of his speechifying or beautiful complexion. He is said to be good, that fault-free man of understanding, in whom this kind of behavior is extirpated, it being destroyed at its roots and abolished. A man who is without religious observances, and who speaks what is false, is not an ascetic merely by reason of his shaven head. He who stills all his evils, small and great, is said to be an ascetic because those evils have been stilled. One is not a bhikkhu merely because he begs alms from others. One is not a bhikkhu merely because of having adopted a bad teaching. He is said to be a bhikkhu who lives in the world with discrimination, having, by means of the spiritual life, set aside merit and demerit. One who is confused and ignorant does not become a silent sage merely by observing silence. But that spiritually mature person who, as if holding a pair of scales, accepts the best and rejects the evil, he is a silent sage. He is a silent sage for that very reason. He is also called a silent sage because he understands both worlds. A man who harms living beings is not one who is spiritually developed. He is said to be spiritually developed who is harmless towards all living beings. Without having attained to the destruction of the defilements, bhikkhu, you should not rest content with rules of conduct and religious observances, with the attainment of concentration, or with living in seclusion, nor with thinking, I enjoy the bliss of emancipation that is unknown to ordinary people.
The Way. Fundamentally, Buddhism is a path, or a way. It is more than an abstract philosophy, which one might find intellectually stimulating and interesting, and it is more than a lifestyle that one might exhaust by wearing particular clothes or cutting one's hair in a certain style. It is a path which one sets out to follow, which transforms all aspects of life. In this chapter, reference is made to the Eightfold Way, to the Four Noble Truths, and to the three lakshanas, or marks of existence. Further explanation on each of these can be found later.
Best of ways is the Eightfold Way. Best of truths are the Four Noble Truths. Passionlessness is the best of mental states. The man of vision is the best of bipeds. This indeed is the way. There is no other that leads to purity of vision. Enter upon the way. This way is the bewilderment of Mara. Following this way you will make an end of suffering. This indeed is the way proclaimed by me, ever since I knew how to draw out the darts of craving. By you must the zealous effort be made. The Tathagatas are only proclaimers of the way. Those who are absorbed in higher meditative states eventually win release from the bondage of Mara. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with insight, one becomes weary of suffering. This is the way to purity. All conditioned things are painful. When one sees this with insight, one becomes weary of suffering. This is the way to purity. All things whatsoever are devoid of unchanging selfhood. When one sees this with insight, one becomes weary of suffering. This is the way to purity. All things whatsoever are devoid of unchanging selfhood. When one sees this with insight, one becomes weary of suffering. This is the way to purity. One who does not make use of his spiritual opportunities, who, though young and strong, is lazy, weak in aspiration, and inactive, such a lazy person does not find the way to insight. Guarded in speech as well as controlled in mind, let one do no ethically unskilful thing with the body. Purifying these three avenues of action, let him attain the way made known by the sages. From application arises the spiritually great. From lack of application the spiritually great wanes. Having known these two avenues of increase and decrease of the great, let him so establish himself that the great may flourish. Cut down the whole forest, not just one tree. From the forest arises fear. Cutting down both wood and brushwood, be out of the wood, bhikkhu. To the extent that one has not cut down the last little bit of this brushwood, of the craving of man for woman, to that extent his mind will be fettered as the sucking calf to its mother. Cut off your sticky affection, as one plucks with one's hand the white autumnal lotus. Develop the way of peace, the nirvana taught by the happy one. Here shall I stay during the rains, here in the cold season and the hot. Thus thinks the spiritually immature person. He does not understand the dangers to life. That infatuated man, whose delight is in offspring and cattle, death goes and carries him off, as a great flood sweeps away a sleeping village. Sons are no protection, nor father, nor yet other relatives. For him who is seized by the end-maker death, there is no protection forthcoming from relatives. Knowing the significance of this, let the spiritually mature person, the man restrained by good conduct, speedily cleanse the way leading to nirvana.
The Miscellaneous. As its title suggests, this chapter contains verses of a miscellaneous nature. Mostly, these consist in exhortations similar to those of the rest of the Dhammapada, but two verses in particular require explanation. Verse 294 reads, "Having slain mother and father and 2 warrior kings, and having destroyed a kingdom together with the king's revenue collector, the Brahmana goes free from sin." The language here is complexly symbolic. The mother that is slain is craving, the father self-conceit. The 2 warrior kings are the 2 wrong views of eternalism and annihilationism, all of which must be removed if we are to attain real intimacy with truth. The kingdom that must be destroyed refers to the need to overcome fixation with the senses, and the revenue collector is the passionate delight that arises from the senses. Finally, Brahmana is here used as a synonym for the enlightened. The succeeding verse also uses such symbolic language. Having slain mother and father and 2 learned kings, and having killed a tiger as the 5th, the Brahmana goes free from sin. The mother, father, and learned kings are the same as before. The tiger refers to pernicious doubt, which must be rooted out if we are to live with faith and confidence in our chosen way.
If, by renouncing a limited happiness, one would see an abundant happiness, let the spiritually mature person, having regard to the abundant happiness, sacrifice the limited happiness. He who, contaminated by his association with hatred, seeks happiness for himself by inflicting suffering on others, is not released from hatred. What is to be done, that is neglected. What is not to be done, that is done. Of those who are arrogant and heedless, the defilements increase. Those who earnestly practice mindfulness with regard to the body, not following after what is not to be done, and steadfastly pursuing what is to be done, of these mindful and fully attentive ones, the defilements come to an end. Having slain mother and father and 2 warrior kings, and having destroyed a kingdom together with the king's revenue collector, the Brahmana goes free from sin. Having slain mother and father and 2 learned kings, and having killed a tiger as the 5th, the Brahmana goes free from sin. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those who day and night are constantly mindful of the virtues of the Buddha. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those who day and night are constantly mindful of the qualities of the Dhamma. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those who day and night are constantly mindful of the characteristics of the Arya Sangha. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those who day and night are constantly mindful of the transitory nature of the body. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those who day and night delight in non-injury. Wide awake they always arise in the morning, the disciples of Gautama, those whose mind day and night delights in meditation. It is difficult to go forth from home to the homeless life, and difficult to delight therein once one has gone forth. At the same time, household life is painful, and painful likewise is living together with those who are one's peers. Travellers on the road of birth, death, and rebirth are oppressed by suffering. So do not be such a traveller, oppressed by suffering. He who is perfect in faith and good conduct, and possessed of fame and wealth, he is honoured everywhere, to whatever country he resorts. Like the snowy mountain range, the good are visible even from afar. The wicked are not seen, like arrows shot in the night. He who sits alone, lies down alone and walks alone, without weariness, and who strives all alone to subdue himself, he will take delight in the solitude of the forest.
The woeful state. The woeful state refers both to hell, the idea of which is a significant spur to practice in many schools of Buddhism, and to the prospect of a life characterized by dissatisfaction and dissipation. The chapter stresses the need for energy and commitment in living an ethical and a spiritual life. Such a course is not a soft option. It requires vigor to make the most of the precious opportunity of our human birth.
One who tells lies arises by way of rebirth in a state of woe, as does one who, having done something, says, "I don't do that sort of thing." These 2 sons of Manu, the primeval progenitor, men of base actions, on departing this life have the same painful destiny in the other world. Many wearers of the yellow robe are of bad qualities, or of an evil disposition and uncontrolled. These bad people, on account of their bad deeds, arise after death in a state of woe. Better to swallow a flaming, red-hot ball of iron than to be an immoral, uncontrolled man living on the alms food of the land. A heedless man who resorts to the wives of others comes by 4 evil states: acquisition of demerit, not sleeping soundly as desired, thirdly, blame, and fourthly, rebirth in a state of woe. The result is acquisition of demerit and a wretched future course. The short-lived enjoyment of an apprehensive man with an apprehensive woman. Also, the king imposes a heavy penalty. Therefore, let not a man resort to another's wife. Just as sharp-edged kusa grass, wrongly taken hold of, cuts the hand, so the life of a religious, wrongly grasped, drags down to a state of woe. Any unprincipled act, and any sullied religious observance, a slack spiritual life filled with suspicion, This is of little benefit. If you have something to do, attack it vigorously. One who lives the homeless life half-heartedly scatters much dust of passion around. An ill deed is better left undone, for an ill deed torments one afterwards with remorse. Better done is a good deed, having done which one is not so tormented. Like a frontier city, well guarded within and without, so guard yourself. Let not the fortunate moment of human birth pass you by. Those who allow the fortunate moment to pass by grieve when they go to the woeful state. Those who are ashamed of what is not shameful, and who are not ashamed of what is shameful, such beings, taking upon themselves wrong views, go to an evil state. Those who see what morally is not fearful as fearful, and who see what morally is fearful as not fearful, such beings, taking upon themselves wrong views, go to an evil state. Those who think what morally is blamable, not blamable, and who see what morally is not blamable as blamable, such beings, taking upon themselves wrong views, go to an evil state. Knowing the morally blamable as blamable, and the morally free from blame as blameless, those beings, taking upon themselves right views, go to a happy state.
The elephant. The figure of the elephant appears in numerous Buddhist texts as a symbol of the dignity, calm, patience, and grandeur of the awakened. A tamed elephant is a creature of tremendous power and control. Likewise, the practitioner must live with energy and discipline. And, though friends are good in time of need, he or she must be willing to walk alone if good companions on the path are nowhere to be found.
I shall patiently endure abuse, just as the trained elephant endures in battle the arrow shot from a bow. The many are indeed ill-natured. The tamed elephant is led to the assembly. The king mounts the tamed elephant. Among men, best is the self-controlled person who patiently endures abuse. Trained mules are best, also equine thoroughbreds have sinned, and the mighty fighting elephants, but best of all is the self-controlled man. One does not go to the unfrequented realm by such vehicles as these, as does a controlled one go to it by means of a well-subdued, disciplined self. The elephant called Dannapala is difficult to restrain when his temples are streaming with must in the time of rut. Shackled, he refuses his food. The tusker remembers the delightful elephant forest. When one is sluggish and gluttonous, given to sleep, and a roller about like a great hog fed on grains, such a stupid person goes again and again to a womb to be reborn. Formerly, this mind of mine went wandering about where it wished, as it liked, and according to its pleasure. Today I will control it radically, as the wielder of the elephant-driver's hook restrains the rutting elephant. Be delighters in non-heedlessness. Keep watch over your mind. Lift yourself clear of the difficult road of the mental defilements, as an elephant sunk in a bog hauls himself out. Should you get a sensible companion, one who is fit company for you, who behaves well and is wise, then go about with him joyous and mindful, overcoming all external and internal dangers. Should you not get a sensible companion, one who is fit company for you, who behaves well and is wise, then go about alone, like a king forsaking a conquered country, or like an elephant living solitary in the Matunga forest. It is better to go about alone. There is no companionship with the spiritually immature. Going about alone, one commits no sins, like an elephant living unconcerned in the Matunga forest. Friends are good in time of need. Contentment is good in every way. At the end of life, a store of merit is good. Good is the leaving behind of all suffering. Here, reverence for mother is good. Reverence for father is also good. Here, reverence for asceticism is good. Reverence for holiness is also good. The lifelong practice of virtue is good. A firmly established faith in the three jewels is good. Good is the getting of wisdom. The non-doing of evil is good.
Craving. A creeper which grasps whatever support it can find and can eventually suffocate a host plant or damage a strong wall is a striking image of our subjection to craving. Because we mistake the things of this world as ultimately meaningful and beautiful, we are distracted from the spiritual realm. We become enwrapped in limited and limiting concerns. And so we do not reach our potential and do not experience the delight of release and freedom from suffering.
The craving of the man who lives carelessly increases like the Maluva creeper. He runs from existence to existence like a monkey in the jungle, leaping from tree to tree in search of fruit. Whoever in the world is overcome by this wretched, adhesive craving, his sorrows grow like the barana grass that is rained upon. Whoever in the world overcomes this wretched, adhesive craving, so difficult to overcome, his sorrows fall from him like drops of water from the lotus leaf. I tell you this, be of good cheer, as many of you as are here assembled. Dig out the root of craving, as the seeker of the Usura digs out the borana grass. Don't let Mara, the evil one, break you again and again, as a river in spate breaks the reed. Just as a felled tree shoots up again, if the root is uninjured and stout, so this suffering of ours arises again and again, if the propensity to craving is not destroyed. The currents of his passion-based thoughts carry him away, that man of wrong views, for whom the 36 streams of craving, flowing towards what is pleasurable, are strong. The streams of craving flow everywhere, and the creeper of craving, having sprung up, remains clasping its objects. Seeing that creeper sprung up, sever its root with the knife of wisdom. Delights arise for a being, delights that rush on and are saturated with craving. Those seekers after pleasure, who are attached to what is agreeable, those men are indeed bound for rebirth and old age. Attended upon by craving, the race of men run about in terror like a trapped hare. Fettered and bound as they are, suffering befalls them again and again for a long time. Attended upon by craving, the race of men run about in terror like a trapped hare. Therefore let him allay craving, the bhikkhu who is desirous of his own freedom from passion. Just look at him, the man who, having been delivered from the jungle of craving and drawn to the life of the jungle, nonetheless, having been thus delivered from the jungle of craving, runs from the jungle to the jungle of household life. Freed, he runs back to his former bondage. That is not a strong bond, say the wise, which is made of iron, wood, or plaited grass. Passionate fondness for jewelled earrings, and longing with regard to sons and wives, that is a strong bond, say the wise. It drags one down, is loose-fitting, yet difficult to be got rid of. This bond they too cut off, those longing free ones, who, giving up sensual pleasures, go forth from the household life. The passionately lustful man falls back into the torrent of repeated existence, just as the spider returns to the center of its web after running out and feeding on a trapped fly. This too the wise man cuts off and renounces. Free from longing, he leaves behind all suffering. Give up what is before in time. Give up what is after. Give up what is in between. Cross to the further shore of existence, and with mind wholly released, you will undergo birth and decay no more. For the person of disturbed thinking, whose passions are acute, and who looks only for what is lovely, craving grows apace. He who delights in calming down his thinking, who meditates on the lovely as being truly unlovely, and who is always mindful, he will cut through the bonds of Mara. The one who has arrived at spiritual perfection, who is devoid of fear, free from craving, and without moral blemish, that person has wrenched out the darts of mundane existence. This is the last body he will wear. One who is free from craving, not grasping, skilled in the explanation of doctrinal terms, and who would understand the words of the Buddha's teaching in context, that person is truly called a wearer of his last body, very wise, and a great man. I am all-conquering, all-knowing, and in all respects unstained, all-abandoning, freed through the destruction of craving, and having, by myself, thoroughly comprehended the destruction of craving. Whom should I point out as my teacher? The gift of the Dhamma surpasses all gifts. The taste of the Dhamma surpasses all tastes. Delight in the Dhamma surpasses all delights. The destruction of craving overcomes all suffering. Possessions strike down the man of evil understanding, but not those who are seekers of the beyond. Because of his craving for possessions, the man of evil understanding strikes himself down as if he were striking down others. Weeds are the blemish of cultivated fields, lust of this human race. Hence what is given to those free from lust is productive of much fruit in the shape of merit. Weeds are the blemish of cultivated fields, hatred of this human race. Hence what is given to those free from hate is productive of much fruit in the shape of merit. Weeds are the blemish of cultivated fields, delusion of this human race. Hence what is given to those free from delusion is productive of much fruit in the shape of merit. Weeds are the blemish of cultivated fields, covetousness of this human race. Hence what is given to those free from covetousness is productive of much fruit in the shape of merit.
The Bhikkhu. The qualities described in this chapter of modesty, restraint, tranquility, and the aspirations it encourages to mindfulness, wisdom, loving-kindness, are spoken of in terms of the life and training of a monk, but they are as relevant to all practitioners. To whatever extent we are able to cultivate such virtues, we will experience increased happiness and release from suffering and confusion. One verse refers to 3 sets of 5s, which are to be cut away, abandoned, and cultivated. The first 2 of these are traditional lists of fetters, holding us back from awakening. The 5 that are to be cultivated are the 5 spiritual faculties of faith, wisdom, concentration, energy, and mindfulness.
Restraint with the eye is good. Good is restraint by the ear. Restraint by the nose is good. Good is restraint with the tongue. Bodily restraint is good. Good is restraint in speech. Restraint of the mind is good. Good in all respects is restraint. The bhikkhu who is in all respects restrained is freed from all suffering. He is truly called a bhikkhu whose hands are controlled, whose feet are controlled, whose speech is controlled, who is controlled in thought, whose delight is within, and who is collected, solitary, content. The utterance is sweet of that bhikkhu who controls his mouth, who speaks in moderation, who is not puffed up with his knowledge, and who explains the meaning of the Buddha's words and their practical application. A bhikkhu who abides in the teaching, who delights in the teaching, who reflects on the teaching, and who bears the teaching in mind, will not fall away from the true teaching. Let one not despise what he has gained by way of alms. Let him not live envying the gains of others. The bhikkhu who envies the gains of others does not attain to meditative concentration. Even if a bhikkhu's gains by way of alms be very little, let him not despise what he has gained. The gods praise him who is of pure livelihood and unwearied. He is indeed called a bhikkhu, for whom nowhere in the mind and body is there anything of which to say, "This is mine," and who does not grieve for what does not really exist. The bhikkhu who dwells in loving kindness, and who is happy in the mandate of the Buddha, would attain to the state that is peace, to the quieting of conditioned existence, and to bliss. Bhikkhu, empty this boat. Emptied, it will go more quickly and lightly for you. Having cut out lust and hatred, you will then go to nirvana. Cut away 5, abandon 5, and, in addition, cultivate 5. The bhikkhu who has transcended the 5 attachments is called one who has crossed the flood. Be absorbed in higher meditative states, bhikkhu. Don't be heedless. Don't allow your mind to whirl about among sensual pleasures. Don't, through heedlessness, swallow a red-hot iron ball, and then, when it scorches you, cry out, "What torment!" There is no absorption in higher meditative states for one who is without wisdom. There is no wisdom for one who is unabsorbed in higher meditative states. He in whom are found both absorption in higher mental states and wisdom is truly in the very presence of nirvana. For the bhikkhu who enters an empty cottage, who is of peaceful mind, and who perfectly comprehends the Dhamma, there is a joy surpassing that of men. Howsoever one grasps the fact of the rise and fall of the aggregates of conditioned existence, he attains a joy and delight that, to the discerning person, is as nectar. Here in the world, the first thing for the wise bhikkhu is this: control of the senses, contentment, restraint through observance of the bhikkhu's code of conduct, and association with friends who are virtuous, of pure life and energetic. Let one be hospitable and well-mannered. Being on this account full of happiness, one will make an end of suffering. Just as the jasmine creeper sheds its withered flowers, so, bhikkhus, should you totally get rid of lust and hatred. He who is tranquil in body, tranquil in speech, and possessed of mental tranquillity, who is well integrated, and who has left behind worldly things, such a bhikkhu is said to be at peace. Yourself reprove yourself. Yourself examine yourself. Thus, self-guarded and mindful, the bhikkhu will live happily. One is one's own protector. What other protector should there be? Therefore, control this self of yours, as a trader manages a noble steed. The bhikkhu who is full of joy and happy in the instruction of the Buddha will attain to the state of peace, to the blissful allaying of mundane conditions. A youthful bhikkhu even, who commits himself to the Buddha's instruction, lights up the world like the moon when freed from cloud.
The Brahmana. This chapter brings the Dhammapada to a rousing close. In a rhythmic incantation, it expounds the countless positive qualities of the Brahmana, the awakened one, the Buddha. He lives happily, is peaceful and without anger. He is spotless and pure as the moon. He has accomplished all that is to be accomplished.
Exert yourself and cut off the stream. Do away with sense desires, Brahmana. Having known the destruction of mundane conditionings, be a knower of the unmade, Brahmana. When the Brahmana has crossed over in respect of the two states, calm and insight, then all the fetters of that knowing one come to an end. I call him a Brahmana, for whom there exists neither the further shore nor the hither shore, nor both, and who is without distress and free from all bonds. I call him a Brahmana, who is absorbed in higher meditative states, who is unstained by passion, whose task is done, who is free from the defilements, and who has reached the ultimate goal. The sun shines bright by day, the moon shines at night, the armed warrior shines bright, the Brahmana, who is absorbed in higher meditative states, shines bright. But the Buddha shines bright by day and by night, shining with splendor. Brahmana means one who bars out evil. He is said to be an ascetic who lives in quiet. He is said to be a goer forth from the household life, who is sent forth into banishment his own impurities. One should not strike a Brahmana, nor should the Brahmana who is struck give vent to anger. Shame on him who strikes a Brahmana. More shame on him who gives vent to anger. For a Brahmana, there is nothing better than a mind restrained from its likings. To the extent that the harming mind turns back from harming, to that extent suffering is stopped. I call him a Brahmana, by whom no evil is done by the body, by speech, or by the mind, and who, with regard to these three, is restrained. As a Brahmin worships the sacrificial fire, so let one pay homage to the person from whom one comes to know the truth, taught by the perfectly enlightened one. One is not a Brahmana on account of matted hair, or one's clan, or birth. He in whom there exists both truth and principle, he is pure. He is a Brahmana. What use your matted hair, you man of evil understanding? What use your deer-skin garment? Within you are a dense jungle of passions, yet you touch up the outside. The man who wears rags from a dust heap, who is lean, whose veins stand out all over the body, and who, alone and in the forest, is absorbed in higher meditative states, him I call a Brahmana. I do not call him a Brahmana who is merely womb-born, or sprung from a Brahmin mother. If he is a man of possessions, he is simply called one who addresses others familiarly. I call him a Brahmana who is free from attachment and without possessions. I call him a Brahmana who, having severed all bonds, does not tremble, and who has unburdened himself of all attachments. I call him a Brahmana who has severed the bond of hatred, the thong of craving, and the cord of wrong views, together with its concomitants, who has lifted the crossbar of ignorance, and who is enlightened. I call him a Brahmana who, being good, patiently endures abuse, flogging, and imprisonment, and whose strong army is the strength of patience. I call him a Brahmana who is without anger, who scrupulously observes religious vows, who is ethical, free from lust and control, who wears his last body. I call him a Brahmana who, like a drop of water on a lotus leaf, or a mustard seed on the point of an awl, does not cling to sensuous pleasures. I call him a Brahmana who in this very life has personally known the destruction of suffering, who has laid down the burden of conditioned existence, and who is detached from the world. I call him a Brahmana whose knowledge is deep, who is a man of understanding, who knows what is and what is not the way, and who has reached the supreme goal. I call him a Brahmana, who socializes with neither householders nor homeless ones, who lives free from attachment, and who desires little or nothing. I call him a Brahmana, who has abandoned violence towards living beings, be they moving about or stationary, or whether trembling and afraid or firm-minded, and who neither slays nor causes others to slay. I call him a Brahmana, who is conciliatory among the antagonistic, peaceful among those who have recourse to violence, and who is unattached among the attached. I call him a Brahmana, from whom lust, hatred, pride, and hypocrisy have fallen away like a mustard seed from the point of an awl. I call him a Brahmana, who would utter gentle, instructive, true speech, by which one would give offence to no one. I call him a Brahmana, who takes in this world nothing that is not given to him, be it long or short, small or great, pleasant or unpleasant. I call him a Brahmana, in whom are found no longings, either for this world or the other world, who is utterly free from longings, and who is released from all defilements. I call him a Brahmana, who, through perfect knowledge, is free from doubts, and who has achieved the plunge into the deathless. I call him a Brahmana who, here in this world, has transcended good and bad, together with attachment, and who is free from sorrow, without passion, and pure. I call him a Brahmana, who is spotless and pure as the moon, clear-minded and undisturbed by the defilements, and in whom delight in conditioned existence has been extinguished. I call him a Brahmana, who has passed over this dangerous track of the passions, this fortress of delusion that is repeated existence, who has crossed the flood and reached the further shore, who is absorbed in higher meditative states, who is passionless and free from doubts, and who, being without further clinging, is at peace in nirvana. I call him a Brahmana, who, having here in the world given up the pleasures of sense, goes forth as a homeless one, and who has destroyed craving for sensuous existence. I call him a Brahmana, who, having here in the world given up craving, goes forth as a homeless one, and who has destroyed craving for conditioned existence. I call him a Brahmana, who, having discarded human bonds and transcended celestial bonds, is delivered from all bonds whatsoever. I call him a Brahmana, who has given up attachment and aversion, become tranquil and free from the substrates of conditioned existence, and who thus is a hero, victorious over the whole world. I call him a Brahmana, who knows in every way the passing away and arising of living beings, who is unattached, living happily and enlightened. I call him a Brahmana, whose track gods, celestial musicians, and human beings do not know, that supremely worthy one who has destroyed the defilements. I call him a Brahmana, for whom there is nothing before or after or in between, who is without material or mental possessions, and who is unattached. I call him a Brahmana, who is foremost among men, excellent, heroic, a great sage, the victorious one, the one who is passionless, washed clean of the defilements, and enlightened. I call him a Brahmana, who knows his previous lives, who sees heaven and the state of woe, who has reached the extinction of births, who is a silent sage, a master of the higher knowledge, and who has accomplished all that is to be accomplished.
Thus have I heard. The Buddha was able, through his teaching and the spiritual impact of his presence, to inspire people to change their lives, to dedicate themselves to practicing his teaching. The story of Angulimala is a striking example. A feared bandit, described as murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings, Angulimala had earned his name through undertaking to make himself a necklace, mala, of human fingers, anguli. He killed whoever he could, and added one of their fingers to his collection. The Buddha was warned that Angulimala had laid waste villages, towns, and districts, and yet he knowingly set out to walk the road towards Angulimala. The story is told in the words of Ananda, the Buddha's cousin. It is said that Ananda, who was the Buddha's companion for the last 25 years of his life, was always present when the Buddha taught. In fact, Ananda made this a condition of his becoming the Buddha's attendant. If ever he was not able to be present while the Buddha was teaching, then the Buddha would repeat to him whatever he had said when next they met. Ananda is said to have memorized the Buddha's words and to have repeated these when the scriptures came to be collected. Ananda tells the story.
The bandit Angulimala saw the Blessed One coming in the distance. When he saw him, he thought, "It is wonderful. It is marvelous. Men have come along this road in groups of 10, 20, 30, and even 40, but still they have fallen into my hands. And now this recluse comes alone, unaccompanied, as if driven by fate. Why shouldn't I take this recluse's life?" Angulimala then took up his sword and shield, buckled on his bow and quiver, and followed close behind the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One performed such a feat of supernormal power that the bandit Angulimala, though walking as fast as he could not catch up with the Blessed One, who was walking at his normal pace. Then the bandit Angulimala thought, "It is wonderful, it is marvelous. Formerly I could catch up even with a swift elephant and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift horse and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift chariot and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift deer and seize it. But now, though I am walking as fast as I cannot catch up with this recluse who is walking at his normal pace." He stopped and called out to the Blessed One, "Stop, recluse! Stop, recluse!" "I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too." Then the bandit Angulimala thought, "These recluses, sons of the Shakyans, speak truth, assert truth. But though this recluse is still walking, he says, 'I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too.' Suppose I question this recluse." Then the bandit Angulimala addressed the Blessed One in stanzas thus: "While you are walking, recluse, you tell me you have stopped. But now, when I have stopped, you say, 'I have not stopped.' I ask you now, O recluse, about the meaning. How is it that you have stopped, and I have not?" The Enlightened One said, "Angulimala, I have stopped forever. I abstain from violence towards living beings, but you have no restraint towards things that live. That is why I have stopped, and you have not." And Angulimala said, "Oh, at long last this recluse, a venerated sage, has come to this great forest for my sake. Having heard your stanza teaching me the Dharma, I will indeed renounce evil forever." So saying, the bandit took his sword and weapons and flung them in a gaping chasm's pit. The bandit worshipped the Sublime One's feet, and then and there asked for the going forth. The Enlightened One, the sage of the great compassion, the teachers of the world with all its gods, addressed him with these words: "Come, bhikkhu." and that was how he came to be a bhikkhu.
Through his courage and the simple directness of his teachings, the Buddha was able to convince even Angulimala to set aside his violent ways and follow a path of peace. When King Ajatasattu of Magadha heard that the Buddha was staying in a mango grove near one of his palaces, he set out to visit him in hopes that the Buddha would enlighten him and bring peace to his mind. Ananda continues the story.
And King Ajatasattu, having placed his wives each on one of 500 elephants, mounted the royal tusker and proceeded in royal state, accompanied by torch-bearers from Rajagaha towards Jivaka's mango grove. And when King Ajatasattu came near the mango grove, he felt fear and terror, and his hair stood on end. And feeling this fear and the rising of the hairs, the king said to Jivaka, "Friend Jivaka, you are not deceiving me. You are not tricking me. You are not delivering me up to an enemy. How is it that from this great number of 1,250 monks, not a sneeze, a cough, or a shout is to be heard? Have no fear, your majesty. I would not deceive you or trick you or deliver you up to an enemy. Approach, sire, approach. There are the lights burning in the round pavilion." So King Ajatasattu, having ridden on his elephant as the ground would permit, alighted and continued on to the door of the round pavilion. Then he said, "Jivaka, where is the Lord?" "That is the Lord, sire. That is the Lord sitting against the middle column with his order of monks in front of him." Then King Ajatasattu went up to the Lord and stood to one side, and standing there to one side, the king observed how the order of monks continued in silence like a clear lake, and he exclaimed, "If only Prince Udayabhadra were possessed of such calm as this order of monks."
The life to which the Buddha invited his listeners was one of tranquility, but also a life of vigor, striving for wisdom, kindness, and awakening. After the Buddha had answered King Ajatasattu's many questions, the king exclaimed, as Ananda reports,
"Excellent, Lord, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the blessed Lord has expounded the Dharma in various ways. And I, Lord, go for refuge to the blessed Lord, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha. May the blessed Lord accept me from this day forth as a lay follower as long as life shall last."
The Buddha discouraged his followers from dwelling upon certain kinds of philosophical or scholastic questions, such as the debates whether the universe is eternal or not, and whether it is finite or infinite. When the monk Malunkyaputta was taken up in such questions, he came to ask the Buddha for answers. The Buddha's reply summarizes an important attitude of the tradition. He said,
Suppose, Malunkyaputta, a man were wounded by an arrow thickly smeared with poison, and his friends and companions, his kinsmen and relatives, brought a surgeon to treat him. The man would say, "I will not let the surgeon pull out this arrow until I know whether the man who wounded me was a noble, or a Brahmin, or a merchant, or a worker." And he would say, "I will not let the surgeon pull out this arrow until I know the name and clan of the man who wounded me, until I know whether the man who wounded me was tall, or short, or of middle height, until I know whether the man who wounded me was dark, or brown, or golden-skinned, until I know whether the man who wounded me lives in such a village, or town, or city, until I know whether the bow that wounded me was a longbow or a crossbow, until I know whether the bow's string that wounded me was fibre, or reed, or sinew, or hemp, or bark, until I know whether the shaft that wounded me was wild or cultivated, until I know with what kind of feathers the shaft that wounded me was fitted, whether those of a vulture, or a crow, or a hawk, or a peacock, or a stork, until I know with what kind of sinew the shaft that wounded me was bound, whether that of an ox, or a buffalo, or a lion, or a monkey, until I know what kind of arrow it was that wounded me, whether it was hoof-tipped or curved or barbed or calf-toothed or oleander. And all this would still not be known to that man, and meanwhile he would die. So too, Malunkyapata, if anyone should say this, I will not lead the holy life under the Blessed One until the Blessed One declares to me the world is eternal, or after death a Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist, that would still remain undeclared by the Tathagata, and meanwhile that person would die.
The point of these verses is not that philosophical questions should never be asked, but that we are faced with more pressing issues than the abstract, unanswerable questions we often spend time on. We confuse ourselves, becoming wrapped up in speculation, rather than directly addressing the source of our painful experience, which lies in the basic three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. The consolation of the Buddha's words lies in the fact that a skilled surgeon can quite easily remove the arrow. The Buddha's approach to teaching was straightforward and simple. His concern was to help people to change their lives, to attend to what is truly meaningful, and to develop qualities of wisdom, kindness, and compassion. And though his teaching extended into all aspects of human life, he repeatedly directed his disciples back to his most fundamental points, contained in scriptures like the Dhammapada. The teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which he enumerated in his very first discourse, remains central, and he returned to it throughout his teaching life. Here, Ananda again speaks.
On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Kosambi in a Simsapa grove. Then the Blessed One took up a few Simsapa leaves in his hands and addressed the bhikkhus thus. What do you think, bhikkhus? Which is more numerous, these few Simsapa leaves that I have taken up in my hand, or those in the Simsapa grove overhead? Venerable sir, the Simsapa leaves that the Blessed One has taken up in his hand are few, but those in the Simsapa grove overhead are numerous. So, bhikkhus, the things that I have directly known but have not taught you are numerous, while the things I have taught you are few. And why, bhikkhus, have I not taught those many things? Because they are unbeneficial, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and do not lead to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore I have not taught them. And what, bhikkhus, have I taught? I have taught, this is suffering. I have taught, this is the origin of suffering. I have taught, this is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And why, bhikkhus, have I taught this? Because this is beneficial, relevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and leads to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore I have taught this. Therefore, bhikkhus, an exertion should be made to understand. This is suffering. An exertion should be made to understand. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering.
Here follows a selection of readings from the Pali scriptures, the oldest written text of Buddhism, which illustrate fundamental aspects of the Buddha's teachings. Where necessary, some texts have been slightly shortened and brief introductory paragraphs included, but the intention is, as far as possible, to allow the listener to hear the Buddha speaking in the words of the scriptures. Thus have I heard. Most early Buddhist scriptures begin with this formula, which reflects Buddhism's roots in an oral tradition. In the following account of an incident involving the monk Meghiya, the Buddha outlines the Patimokkha, the basic code of monastic discipline, an extensive list of ethical and behavioral restraints set down in the texts of the Vinaya Pitaka. Meghiya, the Buddha's attendant, learns from direct experience that there is a right time to practice and a right time to do one's job.
Thus have I heard. On a certain occasion the Blessed One dwelt at Karlika, on the Karlika mountain. Now at that time the Venerable Megir was the attendant of the Blessed One, and the Venerable Megir went to where the Blessed One was, and drawing near he saluted the Blessed One, and stationed himself respectfully apart. And while thus standing, the Venerable Megir said to the Blessed One, "I wish, sire, to enter the village of Jantu, to go on my rounds for alms." "Very well, Megir, do as you think fit." And the Venerable Megir, clothing himself in the forenoon and taking his alms bowl and tunic, entered the Jantu village for alms. And when he had gone his rounds and finished his meal, he went to the banks of the Kimikala river, and as he wandered on foot from place to place along the banks of the river, he beheld an enchanting and delightful grove of mango trees. And when he saw it, he exclaimed, "How beautiful, how lovely is this mango grove! Truly this is a fitting place for a scion of noble family to struggle and strive after holiness. If the Blessed One consents, I will return to this mango grove, and there struggle and strive in meditation." And the Venerable Megir went to where the Blessed One was, and drawing near he saluted the Blessed One, and sat down respectfully apart, and while thus sitting, he said to the Blessed One, "In the forenoon, sire, having put on my garments and taking my alms bowl and tunic, I entered the Jantu village for alms, and when I had gone my rounds and finished my meal, I went to the banks of the Kimikala river, and wandering on foot from place to place, I beheld an enchanting and delightful grove of mango trees, and when I saw it, I exclaimed, 'How lovely, how beautiful is this mango grove! Surely this is a fitting place for a scion of noble family to struggle and strive in meditation. If the Blessed One will consent, I will return to this mango grove and struggle and strive in meditation." When these words had been spoken, the Blessed One said to the Venerable Megir, "Wait for the present, Megir. We are alone now, at least till some other bhikkhu arrives." And a second time the Venerable Megir spoke to the Blessed One, saying, "No further duties, sire, have to be performed by the Blessed One. No further experience is needed, but I, sire, have duties still to perform and experience to gain. If, sire, the Blessed One consents, I will go to that mango grove and enter upon the struggle." A second time the Blessed One said to the Venerable Megir, "Wait a while, Megir. We are alone now, at least till some other bhikkhu arrives." The Venerable Megir asked the Blessed One a third time to go to the mango grove. "As to the struggle, Megir, in what terms shall I declare it to you? Do now, Megir, as you think best." And the Venerable Megir arose from his seat and saluted the Blessed One, and passing round, keeping his right side to him, he went to where the mango grove was, and drawing near he entered the mango grove, and sat down during the heat of the day at the foot of a tree. And while living in that mango grove, the Venerable Megir was constantly assailed by three kinds of evil and unlawful thoughts, namely lustful thoughts, malicious thoughts, and cruel thoughts. And the Venerable Megir thought to himself, "How strange is it, how marvelous is it that I, who through faith have abandoned my home for the homeless state, should be filled with these three evil and unlawful thoughts, namely lustful thoughts, malicious thoughts, and cruel thoughts." And the Venerable Megir arose from his solitary communings and went to where the Blessed One was, and having saluted the Blessed One, he sat down respectfully apart, and while thus sitting, he said to the Blessed One, "While living in that mango grove, sire, I was assailed by three evil and unlawful thoughts, namely lustful thoughts, malicious thoughts, and cruel thoughts. And I thought, how strange, how marvelous is it that I, who through faith have abandoned my home for the homeless state, should be assailed by these three evil and unlawful thoughts." When these words had been spoken, the Blessed One said to the Venerable Megir, "For the immaturely released heart, O Megir, 5 conditions conduce to maturity. What are these 5? In this world, Megir, a bhikkhu should have a virtuous friend, a virtuous companion. For the immaturely released heart, Megir, this is the first condition, which conduces to maturity. Further, Megir, a bhikkhu should be pious, should live a life of restraint, according to the precepts, and be endued with right conduct, perceiving danger in the least of the sins, and adopting the moral precepts, should exercise himself therein. For the immaturely released heart, Megea, this is the second condition which conduces to maturity. Further, Megea, there should be discourses such as tend to the eradication of evil, to a beneficial expansion of the heart, to an utter weariness of the world, to the cessation of all desire, to tranquility, to the higher knowledge, to supreme enlightenment, to nirvana, that is, discourses on frugality, on contentment, solitude, exclusiveness, effort and exertion, piety, self-concentration, wisdom and emancipation as resulting from insight acquired by knowledge. By means of such discourses satisfaction is obtained, and trouble and difficulties overcome. For the immaturely released heart, Megea, this is the third condition which conduces to maturity. Further, Megea, the bhikkhu should live a life of effort and exertion. Abandoning unlawful practices, he should practice what is lawful. He should be resolute, put forth his strength, not throwing down the burden in the practice of those things that are lawful. For the immaturely released heart, Megea, this is the fourth condition which conduces to maturity. Further, Megea, the bhikkhu should have wisdom, should be endowed with the knowledge of the rise and set of things, of sublime penetration, and of that which leads to the complete cessation of sorrow. For the immaturely released heart, Megea, this is the fifth condition which conduces to maturity. For the immaturely released heart, Megea, these are the 5 conditions which conduce to maturity. Thus, Megea, when the bhikkhu has provided himself with a virtuous friend, a virtuous companion, a virtuous associate, it is to be expected that he will become pious, that he will live a life of restraint according to the precepts, and be endued with right conduct, and seeing danger in the least of the sins will adopt the moral precepts and exercise himself therein. And those discourses which tend to the eradication of evil, to a beneficial expansion of the heart, to an utter weariness of the world, to the cessation of all desire, to tranquility, to the higher knowledge, to supreme enlightenment, to nibbana, namely discourses on frugality, contentment, solitude, exclusiveness, effort and exertion, piety, self-concentration, wisdom and emancipation resulting from insight acquired by knowledge. By the means of such discourses, satisfaction is obtained and trouble and difficulties overcome. Thus the bhikkhu with a virtuous friend, a virtuous companion, a virtuous associate, will live a life of effort and exertion, and abandoning unlawful practices, will practice what is lawful. He will be resolute, put forth his strength, and not throw down the burden in the practice of what is lawful. Thus the bhikkhu with a virtuous friend, a virtuous companion, a virtuous associate, will become wise, will be endowed with a knowledge of the rise and set of things, of sublime penetration, and of that which conduces to the complete cessation of sorrow. Moreover, Megea, the bhikkhu who holds to these 5 conditions must give special attention to 4 other conditions. In order to abandon lust, he must dwell on the impurity of the body. In order to forsake malice, he must dwell on kindness. With a view to the excision of evil thoughts, he must practice meditation by counting inhalations and exhalations. For the removal of the pride which says, I am, he must exercise himself in the consciousness of the impermanency of all things. By the consciousness of impermanence, the consciousness of non-egoity is established, and he who is conscious of non-egoity succeeds in the removal of the notion I am, and in this very existence attains to nibbana.
Bahia. There once was an ascetic known as Bahia of the bark garment, named for the rough material of his clothing. Bahia sought the Buddha, travelling a very great distance across India in order to meet him. When he arrived where the Buddha was staying, in a grove belonging to one of his wealthy patrons, near the town of Savatthi, Bahia was informed that the Buddha was on his alms round. He decided, nonetheless, to find him and request a teaching. Ananda tells the story.
Bahia beheld the Exalted One going on his rounds for alms in Savatthi, the Lord gracious, beautiful to behold, with senses stilled and mind restrained, as one who has attained the supreme calms of self-conquest, subdued and guarded. And when he beheld him, he went to where the Exalted One was, and drawing near, he bowed his head in salutation at the feet of the Exalted One, and said, "Teach me, O Exalted One, the doctrine. O Happy One, teach me the doctrine, so that throughout the length of my days it may conduce to my happiness and welfare." When these words had been spoken, the Blessed One said to Bahia, "The time is ill chosen. I have entered the city for alms." A second time Bahia said to the Blessed One, "It is hard, sire, to know to which of us death will first come, whether to the Blessed One or to me. Teach me the doctrine, O Blessed One. O Happy One, teach me the doctrine, so that throughout the length of my days it may be for my happiness and welfare." A second time the Blessed One said to Bahia, "The time is ill chosen. I have entered the city for alms." A third time Bahia said to the Blessed One, "It is hard, sire, to know to which of us death will first come, whether to the Blessed One or to me. Teach me the doctrine, O Blessed One. O Happy One, teach me the doctrine, so that throughout the length of my days it may be for my happiness and welfare." Then, Bahia, you should train yourself in this way. In the seen, there will be only the seen. In the heard, only the heard. In the sensed, only the sensed. In the cognized, only the cognized. That is how you should train yourself. When for you there will be only the seen in the seen, only the heard in the heard, only the sensed in the sensed, only the cognized in the cognized, then, Bahia, there is no you in terms of that. When there is no you in terms of that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here, nor yonder, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of suffering. And the heart of Bahia, by this concise exposition of the doctrine by the Blessed One, was freed from attachment.
The Karaniya Metta Sutta. This sutta contains the essence of the Buddha's teachings on metta, or loving kindness. It speaks first of the general attitude and lifestyle that best supports the cultivation of this quality: a simple and frugal life, uncorrupted, capable and just, mild, and then proceeds to outline a meditation practice for cultivating metta, beginning with the phrase, "May everything that lives be well." Through such active well-wishing, supported by an imaginative identification with other living beings, one works to secure a mind of love.
If you know your own good, and see where peace dwells, then this is the task. Lead a simple and a frugal life, uncorrupted, capable, and just. Be mild, speak soft, eradicate conceit. Keep appetites and senses calm. Be discreet and unassuming. Do not seek rewards. Do not have to be ashamed in the presence of the wise. May everything that lives be well, weak or strong, large or small, seen or unseen, here or elsewhere, present or to come, in heights or depths, may all be well. Have that mind for all the world. Get rid of lies and pride. A mother's mind for her baby, her love, but now unbounded. Secure this mind of love, no enemies, no obstructions, wherever or however you may be. It is sublime, this. It escapes birth and death. losing lust and delusion, and living in the truth.
Mahamangala Sutta. Asked by a minor deity to account for the highest blessings one might enjoy, the Buddha offered a catalogue of positive qualities and attainments. Each in turn is described as the highest blessing, from associating with the wise instead of fools, supporting one's parents and cherishing one's wife and children, to possessing a mind that is void of sorrow, stainless, and secure. Each of these is the highest blessing at its own level, from ordinary day-to-day concerns to the complete transformation of awakening, symbolized here by the stainless mind. If one is forced to spend one's time with foolish people, it is a great blessing to meet a wise man or woman. If one is married and has children, then to cherish your partner and your children is a great blessing. And within the Buddha's teaching, a mind that is void of sorrow, stainless, and secure is certainly the greatest blessing.
For welfare wishing, many gods and men have pondered on the most auspicious sign. Tell us the most auspicious sign of all.
Not to serve fools, but men of wisdom deep, and to give worship to the worshipful. This is the most auspicious sign of all. Live in a suitable locality, with deeds of merit done in former times, and aspiration to the perfect state. This is the most auspicious sign of all. Much knowledge and much skill in arts and crafts, a well-learned discipline, and pleasant speech, this is the most auspicious sign of all. The maintenance of parents past their youth, the loving nurture of one's child and wife, and following a peaceful livelihood, this is the most auspicious sign of all. To give in charity, live righteously, to help one's kindred in the time of need, and to do spotless deeds that bring no blame, this is the most auspicious sign of all. To cease and utterly abstain from sin, shunning all wit-destroying drinks and drugs, and to be vigilant in doing good, this is the most auspicious sign of all. Reverent demeanour, humble-heartedness, contentment sweet and lowly gratitude, and hearkening to the law at proper times, this is the most auspicious sign of all. Patience in provocation, pleasant speech, the sight of those who lead the holy life, and talk about the truth in season meet, this is the most auspicious sign of all. Asceticism and the life sublime, the vision splendid of the noble truths, the seeing of Nibbana face to face, this is the most auspicious sign of all. He whose firm mind, untroubled by the touch of all terrestrial happenings whatsoever, is void of sorrow, stainless and secure, this is the most auspicious sign of all. Those who accomplish such good things as these, in every place unconquered do abide, moving in perfect safety where they will, theirs are the most auspicious signs of all.
The Three Jewels. The three jewels, Tiratana, represent the core values of Buddhist faith and practice. They are the three principles honored within all the varied schools of Buddhism, whether in the forest hermitages of Myanmar, the monasteries of Tibet, or the urban practice centers of London and New York. Described as jewels because of their beauty and inestimable value, they are the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. A formula that appears in various places in the Pali scriptures is spoken in gratitude by those who have just heard the Buddha teaching. Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark, so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way has the Blessed One made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma, and to the community of monks. This threefold commitment, known as going for refuge, is a reorientation of one's life towards the values of the Buddha, his teaching, and the spiritual community. The value of this reorientation is well stated by the Dhammapada. Many people, out of fear, flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. He who goes for refuge to the enlightened one, to the truth, and to the spiritual community, and who sees with perfect wisdom the four noble truths, namely suffering, the origin of suffering, the passing beyond suffering, and the noble eightfold way leading to the pacification of suffering, for him this is a safe refuge. For him this is the best refuge. Having gone to such a refuge, one is released from all suffering. From the Dhammapada. The life of the Buddha has already been outlined earlier in the general introduction. In the scriptures, the word Sangha, traditionally the third jewel, is used either to describe the Buddha's followers or those who have attained enlightenment, whether monks, nuns, forest renunciants, or lay practitioners. In modern Buddhist communities, it is often understood simply as the community of those who follow the Buddha's teachings. Now we focus on the second of the three jewels, Dhamma, through reading selected from the Pali scriptures. Dhamma. The word Dhamma literally means law. It has different meanings according to the context. As the second of the three jewels, it is the Buddha's teaching understood both as a description of the nature of existence and as all the many practices which lead to enlightenment. The following selections present both these aspects, Dhamma as how things are, and as a way of living wisely. Samsara. Samsara is the round of birth, death, and rebirth. According to Buddhism, we all have turned through these stages many, many times, being born, living our lives, dying, and coming again to birth. Samsara is sometimes thought of simply as a description of this world, but its range is wider than that. It is a name for the process by which everything conditioned arises, exists, and passes away, and it is marked by certain characteristics, impermanence and suffering among them.
Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi, in Jeta's grove, at Anatta Pindika's park.
Bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. What do you think, bhikkhus? Which is more, the stream of tears that you have shed as you roamed and wandered on through long course, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable? This, or the water in the four great oceans?
As we understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, the stream of tears that we have shed as we roamed and wandered through this long course, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable, this alone is more than the water of the four great oceans.
Good, good, bhikkhus. It is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me in such a way. The stream of tears that you have shed as you roamed and wandered through this long course, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. For a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced the death of a mother. As you have experienced this, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable, the stream of tears that you have shed is more than the water in the great oceans. For a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced the death of a father, the death of a brother, the death of a sister, the death of a son, the death of a daughter, the loss of relatives, the loss of wealth, loss through illness. As you have experienced this, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable, the stream of tears that you have shed is more than the water in the 4 great oceans. For what reason? Because, bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. It is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them.
Samsara can also be described as the absence of the various characteristics of the enlightened state, the perfection of ethics, of meditative concentration, and so on.
Thus have I heard. On one occasion the Blessed One was staying among the Vajjayans at Banda village. There he addressed the monks. "Monks!" "Yes, Lord," the monks responded. The Blessed One said,
It is because of not understanding and not penetrating 4 things that we have wandered and transmigrated on such a long, long time, you and I. Which 4? It's because of not understanding and not penetrating noble virtue that we have wandered and transmigrated on such a long, long time, you and I. It's because of not understanding and not penetrating noble concentration that we have wandered and transmigrated on such a long, long time, you and I. It's because of not understanding and not penetrating noble discernment that we have wandered and transmigrated on such a long, long time, you and I. It's because of not understanding and not penetrating noble release that we have wandered and transmigrated on such a long, long time, you and I. But when noble virtue is understood and penetrated, when noble concentration, noble discernment, noble release is understood and penetrated, then craving for becoming is destroyed. The guide to becoming, craving and attachment is ended. There is now no further becoming.
This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this.
Unexcelled virtue, concentration, discernment and release have been understood by Gautama of glorious stature. Having known them directly, he taught the Dhamma to the monks. The awakened one, the teacher who has put an end to suffering and stress, the one with vision, totally unbound.
T. Lakkhana. The 3 lakkhanas, in Sanskrit lakshanas, are characteristics or marks of all conditioned phenomena. They are marked by suffering, impermanence, and insubstantiality, or being without an enduring essence or self. In the following extract, the Buddha emphasizes that these 3 statements would be true whether or not a Tathagata, a Buddha, were to have arisen. All Buddhas would realize these truths, but they would be true even in an era in which no Buddha had arisen.
Whether Tathagatas arise in the world or not, it still remains a fact, a firm and necessary condition of existence, that all formations are impermanent, that all formations are subject to suffering, that all things are not self. A Tathagata fully awakens to this fact and penetrates it. Having fully awakened to it and penetrated it, he announces it, teaches it, makes it known, presents it, discloses it, analyzes it, and explains it, that all formations are impermanent, that all formations are subject to suffering, that all things are non-self.
Khandas. According to the Dhamma, a human being is made up of 5 heaps or groups of elements, known in Pali as khanda, Sanskrit skanda. These are understood to be the most basic constituents of personality and of sensory experience in general. They are mental and physical forms, feeling, perception, thoughts or mental formations, and consciousness. Reflecting on the khandas is helpful in understanding other aspects of Buddhist doctrine. Here the Buddha defines the 5 khandas in detail.
And why, bhikkhus, do you call it form? It is deformed, bhikkhus, therefore it is called form. Deformed by what? Deformed by cold, deformed by heat, deformed by hunger, deformed by thirst, deformed by contact with flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and serpents. It is deformed, bhikkhus. Therefore it is called form. And why, bhikkhus, do you call it feeling? It feels, bhikkhus, therefore it is called feeling. And what does it feel? It feels pleasure, it feels pain, it feels neither pain nor pleasure. It feels, bhikkhus, therefore it is called feeling. And why, bhikkhus, do you call it perception? It perceives, bhikkhus, therefore it is called perception. And what does it perceive? It perceives blue, it perceives yellow, it perceives red, it perceives white. It perceives, bhikkhus, therefore it is called perception. And why, bhikkhus, do you call them volitional formations? They construct the conditioned, bhikkhus, therefore they are called volitional formations. And what is the condition that they construct? They construct conditioned form as form. They construct conditioned feeling as feeling. They construct conditioned perception as perception. They construct conditioned volitional formations as volitional formations. They construct conditioned consciousness as consciousness. They construct the conditioned, bhikkhus, therefore they are called volitional formations. And why, bhikkhus, do you call it consciousness? It cognizes, bhikkhus, therefore it is called consciousness. And what does it cognize? It cognizes sour, it cognizes bitter, it cognizes pungent, it cognizes sweet. It cognizes sharp, it cognizes mild, it cognizes salty, it cognizes bland. It cognizes, bhikkhus, therefore it is called consciousness.
The characteristic of non-self. Through understanding the khandhas, the Buddha taught, we can come to a deeper understanding of the lakshanas, and thereby to a more thoroughgoing penetration of the nature of reality. Here the Buddha addresses the same point. Ananda tells the story.
Thus have I heard. On one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus of the group of 5 thus. Bhikkhus. Venerable Sir, those bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, form is non-self. For if bhikkhus' form were self, this form would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible to have it of form, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. But because form is non-self, form leads to affliction, and it is not possible to have it of form, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. Feeling is non-self, perception is non-self, volitional formations are non-self, consciousness is non-self. For if bhikkhus' consciousness were self, this consciousness would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible to have it of consciousness, let my consciousness be thus, let my consciousness not be thus. But because consciousness is non-self, consciousness leads to affliction, and it is not possible to have it of consciousness, let my consciousness be thus, let my consciousness not be thus. What do you think, bhikkhus? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change fit to be regarded thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. Is feeling permanent or impermanent? Is perception permanent or impermanent? Are volitional formations permanent or impermanent? Is consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change fit to be regarded thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of form whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all form should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of feeling whatsoever, any kind of perception whatsoever, any kind of volitional formations whatsoever, any kind of consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all consciousness should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself.
Kilesas, or poisons. The Pali word kilesa is sometimes translated as poison, sometimes as defilement or obscuration. The three fundamental defilements are greed, lobha, hatred or aversion, dosa, and delusion, moha. These three states poison the mind, keeping us from experiencing their opposites in qualities of tranquility, love, and wisdom.
Thus have I heard. On one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's grove at Anathapindika's park. Sitting to one side, King Pasenadi of Kosala said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, how many things are there in the world which, when they arise for one's harm, suffering, and discomfort?"
There are, great king, three things in the world which, when they arise for one's harm, suffering, and discomfort. What are the three? Greed, hatred, and delusion. These are the three things in the world which, when they arise for one's harm, suffering, and discomfort. Greed, hatred, and delusion, arisen from within oneself, injure the person of evil mindfulness as its own fruit destroys the reed.
Middle way, Four Noble Truths, and Eightfold Path. In what is reputed to be his first teaching, delivered to the group of 5 ascetics alongside whom he had sought awakening through the traditional methods of self-mortification, the Buddha outlined 3 essential points of his doctrine. First, Buddhism is a middle way between extremes.
Because these two extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What two? The pursuit of sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial.
This teaching steers between indulgence and mortification, aiming for the sane middle ground between all polarities. In addressing cultural and political questions likewise, Buddhism seeks to establish a middle way between extremes. On this basis, the Buddha went on, secondly, to articulate a path to be followed, the noble Eightfold Path that infuses and transforms every aspect of life.
And what, bhikkhus, is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which leads to Nibbana? It is this noble Eightfold Path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This, bhikkhus, is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana.
This middle way is itself the last of the 4 Noble Truths, the third essential point of doctrine that the Buddha outlined in this important teaching. These 4 Noble Truths constitute the starting point of Buddhist practice. We suffer. Through reflection we see that our suffering has a source and an origin. We understand that we can live in a way that will reduce our suffering, and then we begin to strive to embody the Eightfold Path in every dimension of our lives.
Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering, death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there, that is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration.
Death. The Dhammapada includes several verses pointing out the inevitability and unpredictability of death. Many other texts warn of the approach of death, providing a potent stimulus for each one of us to engage ardently in the process of purifying our actions and clarifying our minds. When King Pasenadi Kosala once approached the Buddha in the middle of the day, he was faced with a question.
What do you think, great king? Here a man would come to you from the east, one who is trustworthy and reliable. Having approached, he would tell you, "For sure, great king, you should know this. I am coming from the east, and there I saw a great mountain, high as the clouds, coming this way, crushing all living beings. Do whatever you think should be done, great king." Then a second man would come to you from the west. Then a third man would come to you from the north. Then a fourth man would come to you from the south, one who is trustworthy and reliable. Having approached, he would tell you, "For sure, great king, you should know this. I am coming from the south, and there I saw a great mountain, high as the clouds, coming this way, crushing all living beings. Do whatever you think should be done, great king." If, great king, such a great peril should arise, such a terrible destruction of human life, the human state being so difficult to obtain, what should be done?
If, venerable sir, such a great peril should arise, such a terrible destruction of human life, the human state being so difficult to obtain, what else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously, and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds?
I inform you, great king, I announce to you, great king, aging and death are rolling in on you. When aging and death are rolling in on you, great king, what should be done?
As aging and death are rolling in on me, venerable sir, what else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously, and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds? There are, venerable sir, elephant battles fought by head-anointed Khattiya kings who are intoxicated with the intoxication of sovereignty, who are obsessed by greed for sensual pleasures, who have attained stable control in their country, and who rule having conquered a great sphere of territory on earth. But there is no place for those elephant battles, no scope for them when aging and death are rolling in. There are, venerable sir, cavalry battles fought by head-anointed Khattiya kings. There are chariot battles, infantry battles. But there is no place for those infantry battles, no scope for them when aging and death are rolling in. In this royal court, venerable sir, there are counsellors who, when the enemies arrive, are capable of dividing them by subterfuge. But there is no place for those battles of subterfuge, no scope for them, when aging and death are rolling in. In this royal court, venerable sir, there exists abundant bullion and gold stored in vaults and depositories, and with such wealth we are capable of mollifying the enemies when they come, but there is no place for those battles of wealth, no scope for them when aging and death are rolling in. As aging and death are rolling in on me, venerable sir, What else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously, and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds?
So it is, great king, so it is, great king. As aging and death are rolling in on you, what else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously, and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds?
This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this.
Just as mountains of solid rock, massive reaching to the sky, might draw together from all sides, crushing all in the four quarters, so aging and death come rolling over living beings. Katyas, Brahmins, Vaisas, Shuddhas, Chandalas and scavengers. There's no ground there for elephant troops. They spare none along the way, but come crushing everything. For chariot troops and infantry, one can't defeat them by subterfuge, or buy them off by means of wealth. Therefore, a person of wisdom here, out of regard for his own good, steadfast, should settle faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. When one conducts oneself by Dhamma, with body, speech, and mind, they praise one here in the present life, and after death one rejoices in heaven.
In another brief exchange, this time with Uttara, the Buddha once again encouraged us to realize that our lives are short, so real peace and higher truth must be urgently pursued.
Life is swept along. Short is the lifespan. No shelters exist for one who has reached old age. Seeing clearly this danger in death, one should do deeds of merit that bring happiness. Life is swept along. Short is the lifespan. No shelters exist for one who has reached old age. Seeing clearly this danger in death, a seeker of peace should drop the world's bait.
Finally, answering a question from Ananda regarding the shortness of his own mother's life, the Buddha declared,
All beings that will be born, all of them will depart, leaving their bodies. The wise man, comprehending the decay of all things, should strive to lead a life of meditation.
Karma. Karma has entered the Western mind and the English language. The word means intentional action, and the idea is found in differing forms in several Eastern traditions. Its importance in Buddhism derives from the understanding that beneficial action will lead to beneficial consequences, while actions based in negative states, the kilesas, will lead to harmful consequences.
I am the owner of my actions, heir of my actions. Actions are the womb from which I have sprung. Actions are my relations, actions are my protection. Whatever actions I do, good or bad, of these I shall become the heir. Now, for what good reason should a man or woman, a householder or monk, often contemplate the fact that they are sure to become old and cannot avoid aging? Beings while young take pride in youth, and, infatuated by that pride in youth, they lead an evil life in deeds, words, and thoughts. But in one who often contemplates the certainty of old age, the pride of youth will either vanish entirely or will be weakened. For that good reason, the fact of aging should often be contemplated. For what good reason should a man or woman, a householder or monk, often contemplate the fact that they are sure to become ill and cannot avoid illness? Beings while healthy take pride in their health, and, infatuated by that pride in health, they lead an evil life in deeds, words, and thoughts. But in one who often contemplates the certainty of illness, the pride in health will either vanish entirely or will be weakened. For that good reason, the fact of illness should often be contemplated. For what good reason should a man or woman, a householder or monk, often contemplate the fact that they are sure to die and cannot avoid death? Beings while alive take pride in life, and infatuated by that pride in life, they lead an evil life in deeds, words, and thoughts. But in one who often contemplates the certainty of death, the pride in life will either vanish entirely or will be weakened. For that good reason, the fact of death should often be contemplated. For what good reason should a man or woman, a householder or monk, often contemplate the fact that they must be separated and parted from all that is dear and beloved to them? Beings have lustful desire for what is dear and beloved, and inflamed by lust, they lead an evil life in deeds, words, and thoughts. But in one who often contemplates separation from things dear and beloved, lustful desire for what is dear and beloved will either vanish entirely or will be weakened. For that good reason, the fact that they must be separated and parted from all that is dear and beloved should often be contemplated. For what good reason should a man or woman, a householder or monk, often contemplate the fact that they are owners of their actions, and that whatever actions they do, good or bad, of these they will become the heirs? There are beings who lead an evil life in deeds, words, and thoughts. But in one who often contemplates one's responsibility for one's actions, such evil conduct will either vanish entirely or will be weakened. For that good reason, the fact of responsibility for one's actions should often be contemplated. Now, O monks, the noble disciple contemplates thus: I am not the only one who is sure to become old, to fall ill, and to die. But wherever beings come and go, pass away and re-arise, they are all subject to old age, illness, and death. In one who often contemplates these facts, the path arises. He now regularly pursues, develops, and cultivates that path, and while he is doing so, the fetters are abandoned, and the underlying tendencies eliminated.
On another occasion, the Buddha instructed his son, Rahula, on the importance of reflecting on one's actions, focusing on actions of the body, the speech, and the mind.
What do you think, Rahula? What is the purpose of a mirror?
For the purpose of reflection, Venerable Sir.
So too, Rahula, an action with the body should be done after repeated reflection. An action by speech should be done after repeated reflection. An action by mind should be done after repeated reflection. Rahula, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus: would this action that I wish to do with the body lead to my affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know, this action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may do such an action with the body. Also, Rahula, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus: does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I am doing with the body leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you should suspend such a bodily action. But when you reflect, if you know, this action that I am doing with the body does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may continue in such a bodily action. Also, Rahula, after you have done an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus: does this action that I have done with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action, with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I have done with the body leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it was an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you should confess such a bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the holy life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know, this action that I have done with the body does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It was a wholesome bodily action, with pleasant consequences, pleasant results. You can abide, happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states.
The Buddha goes on from here to advise Rahula to reflect in the same way before, during, and after every act of speech and of mind. This sutta is also interesting for introducing the Buddhist practice of confession. A practitioner, having reflected on his or her actions of body, speech, or mind, and found them to have painful consequences, painful results, will go to his or her wise companion in the holy life and confess those actions and their consequences. Unlike Christian confession, there is no implication of absolution or prescription of penance, but there is an increase in self-knowledge, and there may be a useful and beneficial awareness of falling short of one's ideal. And from that strengthened awareness may develop a galvanized undertaking to change the manner in which one acts, speaks, or thinks. Rebirth. Since every intentional action has consequences, we know, to use a biblical phrase, that we will reap what we sow. Buddhism, like many Eastern beliefs and several strands of the Western classical tradition, holds that these consequences are experienced not only in this lifetime, but beyond it. Buddhist cosmology represents a world made up of numerous levels of being, arranged from hell realms to heavens of increasing beauty and subtlety. The sensuous realm consists of 6 broad layers. They are hells, realms of hungry ghosts, of animals, titans, humans, and shining ones. The first 4 of these layers are known as states of deprivation, as each is marked by a particular form of suffering. The human and deva realms are known as happy destinations, as rebirth in them is beneficial and pleasant. Once, when he was staying at Savatthi, the Buddha stressed how rare it is to be born in the human realm, where, for all the difficulties of our lives, through living with care and attention, we enjoy the greatest possibility of advancing.
Then the Blessed One took up a little bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the bhikkhus thus.
Bhikkhus, what do you think? Which is more, the little bit of soil that I have taken up in my fingernail, or the great earth?
Venerable Sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the Blessed One has taken up in his fingernail is trifling. Compared to the great earth, it is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction.
So too, bhikkhus, those beings who are reborn among human beings are few, but those beings are more numerous who are reborn elsewhere than among human beings. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves thus. We will dwell diligently. Thus should you train yourselves.
On another occasion, the Buddha detailed the forms of affliction that may follow from a number of harmful forms of action, stressing that we are not able to evade responsibility for any one of our actions.
Here, bhikkhu, some man or woman kills living beings and is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Because of performing and undertaking such action, on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a state of deprivation, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell. But if, on the dissolution of the body, after death, he does not reappear in a state of deprivation, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, in hell, but instead comes back to the human state, then, wherever he is reborn, he is short-lived. This is the way, bhikkhu, that leads to short life, namely, one kills living beings and is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. But here, bhikkhu, some man or woman, abandoning the killing of living beings, abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Because of performing and undertaking such action, on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. But if, on the dissolution of the body after death, he does not reappear in a happy destination in the heavenly world, but instead comes back to the human state, then wherever he is reborn, he is long-lived. This is the way, bhikkhu, that leads to long life, namely, abandoning the killing of living beings. One abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, one abides compassionate to all living beings. Beings are owners of their actions, bhikkhu, heirs of their actions. They originate from their actions, are bound to their actions, have their actions as their refuge. It is action that distinguishes beings as inferior and superior.
Three trainings. The three trainings is a popular description of the stages or dimensions of Buddhist practice. They are sila, or ethics, samadhi, or meditation, and panna, or wisdom. All Buddhist practice is contained in these three trainings. Firstly, sila, ethics. If all actions have consequences, and we are responsible for our actions, an ethical life must be the basis of Buddhist training practice. Tradition presents various sets of precepts to be followed according to the lifestyle of the individual, from householder to monk or nun. The most common set of precepts, observed throughout the Buddhist world, is the 5 precepts, purifying acts of body, speech, and mind. In one sutta, the Buddha exhorts his lay followers to observe these precepts, calling them the 5 great gifts. They are gifts which one gives simultaneously to oneself and to others, because one becomes harmless and steady-minded through their application, limiting the damage one does to others and oneself, now and in the future.
There are further amongst these 5 gifts, pristine, of long standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated, and never before adulterated, which are not being adulterated, and which will not be adulterated, not despised by wise ascetics and Brahmins. What are these 5 gifts? Here, monks, a noble disciple gives up the destruction of life and abstains from it. By abstaining from the destruction of life, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, freedom from hostility, freedom from oppression. By giving to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression, he himself will enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. This is the first of those great gifts. Further, monks, a noble disciple gives up the taking of what is not given, and abstains from it. By abstaining from taking what is not given, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear. This is the second of those great gifts. Further, monks, a noble disciple gives up sexual misconduct and abstains from it. By abstaining from sexual misconduct, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear. This is the third of those great gifts. Further, monks, a noble disciple gives up false speech and abstains from it. By abstaining from false speech, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear. This is the fourth of those great gifts. Further, monks, a noble disciple gives up wines, liquors, and intoxicants which are the basis for negligence, and abstains from them. By abstaining from wines, liquors, and intoxicants, the noble disciple gives to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, freedom from hostility, and freedom from oppression. By giving to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression, he himself will enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. This is the fifth of those great gifts.
In another sutta, the Buddha addressed Kesi, the horse trainer. Their exchange is a good example of the Buddha's ability to engage with his students in terms relevant to their own life and experience. Having asked Kesi how he trained tameable horses, the Buddha transposed the horse trainer's 3 approaches to his own ways of encouraging people to practice the 5 precepts, sometimes with gentleness, sometimes with harshness, sometimes with both gentleness and harshness. When he uses gentleness, the Buddha reminds his listeners that good conduct of body, speech, and mind will lead to rebirth in a positive state, as a human or a deva. In using harshness, he warns of the outcomes of misconduct, of behavior that causes harm to self and other, which leads to rebirth in a lower realm. The combination of gentle and harsh approaches is the most comprehensive. It reminds us that every intentional action will be met by an outcome appropriate to its ethical status. Samadhi. Samadhi is the second of the 3 trainings. The word translates literally as concentration. The word is used more broadly to refer to meditation in general. The readings in this section describe a popular form of meditation and some of the positive outcomes possible through its application. Anapanasati. There are many different forms and objects of meditation in the wide Buddhist tradition, but one of the most commonly practiced forms is mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati. The practice involves training the mind by attending to the breath as it comes and goes.
Mindfulness of breathing. And how, bhikkhus, is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit? Here, a bhikkhu gone to the forest, or to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him, ever mindful, he breathes in. He breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or, breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or, breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing pleasure. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing the mental formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mental formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the mental formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, concentrating the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, concentrating the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, contemplating impermanence. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, contemplating impermanence. He trains thus: I shall breathe in, contemplating fading away. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, contemplating fading away. He trains thus: I shall breathe in, contemplating cessation. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, contemplating cessation. He trains thus: I shall breathe in, contemplating relinquishment. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, contemplating relinquishment. Because that is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and great benefit.
Panna, living with wisdom. Wisdom in the Buddhist tradition is more than learning. To live with wisdom is to live with awareness of one's actions and their consequences, and to cultivate understanding through reflecting on the true nature of existence.
His action marks the fool. His action marks the wise person, O monks. Wisdom shines forth in behavior. By three things the fool can be known: by bad conduct of body, speech, and mind. By three things the wise person can be known: by good conduct of body, speech, and mind.
A wise person can make errors. He or she is still subject to the pleasures and pains of embodied life, and until enlightenment is obstructed by ignorance and sensual craving. What distinguishes the wise person from a fool is how he or she relates to these experiences. The fool grasps after them, longing for greater pleasure, whereas the wise person, seeing their true nature, is able to let go of afflictive emotion, ignorance, and grasping.
Because, for the fool, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, this body has originated. For the fool, that ignorance has not been abandoned, and that craving has not been utterly destroyed. For what reason? Because the fool has not lived the holy life for the complete destruction of suffering. Therefore, with the break-up of the body, the fool fares on to another body. Faring on to another body, he is not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, despair, not freed from suffering, I say. Because, for the wise man, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, this body has originated. For the wise man, that ignorance has been abandoned, and that craving has been utterly destroyed. For what reason? Because the wise man has lived the holy life, for the complete destruction of suffering. Therefore, with the break-up of the body, the wise man does not fare on to another body. Not faring on to another body, he is freed from birth, aging, and death, freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, freed from suffering, I say.
Dependent origination. Dependent origination is the central Buddhist doctrine, summarized at several points in the scriptures by this simple formula: this being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. From the cessation of this, that ceases. This is a description of the process by which the present actions and states of mind are conditioned by the past and condition the future. Understanding this process clarifies how we shape the world we experience. The 12 Nidanas, as this circle of dependent origination is called, is depicted pictorially on the outer rim of the wheel of life. The 12 Nidanas.
Because I will teach you dependent origination, and I will analyze it for you. Listen to that, and attend closely. I will speak. And what, bhikkhus, is dependent origination? With ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the six sense bases. With the six sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. And what, bhikkhus, is aging and death? The aging of the various beings and the various orders of beings, their growing old, brokenness of teeth, greyness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of vitality, degeneration of the faculties. This is called aging. The passing away of the various beings from the various orders of beings, their perishing, break-up, disappearance, mortality, death, completion of time, the break-up of the aggregates, the laying down of the carcass. This is called death. Thus, this aging and this death are together called aging and death. And what, bhikkhus, is birth? The birth of the various beings into the various orders of beings, their being born, descent into the womb, production, the manifestation of the aggregates, the obtaining of the sense bases. This is called birth. And what, bhikkhus, is existence? There are these three kinds of existence: sense sphere existence, form sphere existence, formless sphere existence. This is called existence. And what, bhikkhus, is clinging? There are these four kinds of clinging: clinging to sensual pleasures, clinging to views, clinging to rules and vows, clinging to a doctrine of self. This is called clinging. And what, bhikkhus, is craving? There are these six classes of craving: craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for tastes, craving for tactile objects, craving for mental phenomena. This is called craving. And what, bhikkhus, is feeling? There are these six classes of feeling: feeling born of eye contact, feeling born of ear contact, feeling born of nose contact, feeling born of tongue contact, feeling born of body contact, feeling born of mind contact. This is called feeling. And what, bhikkhus, is contact? There are these six classes of contact: eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact. This is called contact. And what, bhikkhus, are the six sense bases? The eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, the body base, the mind base. These are called the six sense bases. And what, bhikkhus, is name and form? Feeling, perception, volition, contact, attention. This is called name. The four great elements and the form derived from the four great elements, this is called form. Thus this name and this form are together called name and form. And what, bhikkhus, is consciousness? There are these six classes of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. This is called consciousness. And what, bhikkhus, are the volitional formations? There are these three kinds of volitional formations: the bodily volitional formation, the verbal volitional formation, the mental volitional formation. These are called the volitional formations. And what, bhikkhus, is ignorance? Not knowing suffering, not knowing the origin of suffering, not knowing the cessation of suffering, not knowing the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called ignorance. Thus, bhikkhus, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as conditions, consciousness. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volitional formations. With the cessation of volitional formations, cessation of consciousness. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering.
Emptiness. We could say of emptiness simply that the world is not how we think it is. The natural human tendency is to see our surroundings as solid and more or less dependably constant. The doctrine of dependent origination holds that all things are conditioned, that all exist within a complex web of causes and conditions. As such, they have no enduring essence. They are constantly changing moment by moment. They are empty.
Then the Venerable Ananda approached the Blessed One and said to him, "Venerable Sir, it is said, 'Empty is the world, empty is the world.' In what way, Venerable Sir, is it said, 'Empty is the world'?"
It is, Ananda, because it is empty of self and of what belongs to self that it is said, empty is the world. And what is empty of self and of what belongs to self? The I, Ananda, is empty of self and of what belongs to self. Forms are empty of self and of what belongs to self. I consciousness is empty of self and of what belongs to self. I contact is empty of self and of what belongs to self. Whatever feeling arises with mind contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that too is empty of self and of what belongs to self. It is, Ananda, because it is empty of self and of what belongs to self, that it is said, empty is the world.
Nibbana, or in Sanskrit, Nirvana. Nibbana is liberation. It is freedom from the kilesas, or the poisons, and the round of rebirth, from all that is conditioned. It is awakening, described in the Dhammapada as unsurpassed security.
The abandoning of sensual desires, along with the bitter touch of grief, the dispelling of sloth, mental dullness, the warding off of anxious worry, purified mindfulness and equipoise, preceded by thinking on the Dhamma. This, I declare, is release by knowledge, the breaking apart of ignorance. Hunger is the worst disease, conditioned existence the worst suffering. Knowing this as it really is, one realizes that nirvana is the highest happiness. Health is the highest gain, contentment the greatest riches. The trustworthy are the best kinsmen. Nirvana is the supreme happiness. Having enjoyed the flavor of solitude and tranquility, free from sorrow and free from sin, one enjoys the rapturous flavor of the truth. There is, bhikkhus, a state where there is neither earth, nor water, nor heat, nor air, neither infinity of space, nor infinity of consciousness, nor nothingness, nor perception, nor non-perception, neither this world, nor that world, both sun and moon. Here, bhikkhus, I say there is no coming, nor going, no staying, neither death nor birth. Not fixed, not movable, it has no support. This is the end of suffering. There is, bhikkhus, an unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed. If, bhikkhus, there were not this unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, there would be no escape from the world of the born, originated, created, formed. But since there is an unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, therefore is there an escape from the born, originated, created, formed. Where water, earth, heat, air no footing find, there burns not any light, nor shines the sun. The moon sheds not her radiant beams, the home of darkness is not there. When in deep, silent hours of thought the holy sage to truth attains, then is he free from joy and pain, from form and formless worlds released.
This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are.